how excited would you be if T. Higgins leaves and the Bengals draft this guy? Is like a thing that I go through my head, and like every time
you don't
I
want
draft,
that with this, because then he's destined to be Burks, because that's what the Titans did with AJ Brown. You can't have him go BT Higgins directly, because then the universe will he'll just be Burks again.
So then if the Patriots draft him, then okay,
Patriots. He would be awesome with the Patriots. He would be like, I don't want to say he would be Kayshon Boutte, but he'd be pretty good there. You know, he'd be like,
there's only one.
There's only one Kayshon.
Only a brief hiatus from this show because in the year 2025, apparently fantasy football is, we've joked about it being year round before. It is quite literally year round. We are more than a week away from the 2025 Super Bowl, and we have millions of dollars of literally millions of dollars of best ball tournaments out there. And the most important thing I think that people want, that we need to figure out at this time of the year, is rookies, right? The rookie class. Who are like the best picks, who are like the good kind of sleepers and cheap picks, who are maybe some guys that are a little bit overpriced, everything there in between. How does the class like stack up, right, to past classes? All that different stuff. Last year we recorded an absolute marathon pod that I've gotten several messages about, like, so when are you and Pat's pod coming out? And I was like, I can't believe you guys like that 3.5 hours digging into every prospect under the sun. But I do think it's a lot of fun to dig into all this. A lot of these guys will end up being totally useless, but to really get a feel for kind of the class and drafting in, the big board, and drafters will launch a tournament. I think FFPC already has way too early tournament. There's a lot out there. And the rookies are kind of like, if you're drafting right now and you're not interested in the rookies, I might tell you to just wait. Like,
that's kind of the point of draft right now, is that it's sort of fun to take your chances on who might be big risers, and the guys before people know who they are. Even there are sleepers. Like normally, we talk about how there aren't any sleepers anymore in fantasy football. But if you get up at like 3 a.m. in the fantasy football season, there are still sleepers. No one has done the homework yet on these guys, because the Super Bowl hasn't happened yet. So, I mean, of course you haven't, but with the tournaments live, and I knew that, based on when they dropped last year's, that I needed to start doing my rookie research earlier than I ever have. So I've got takes already, but there's players that I'm drafting without an ADP, and that can pay off. A couple years ago, pretty sure I was the first person. He still did not have an ADP when I drafted Sam Laporta. So that was, now I thought why did I like Sam Laporta? He had an intriguing yards after catch profile and looked like he was live to go day 2. I didn't think he was going to be a star or anything, but that's where you can really hit to the upside. If you're like, hey, this guy's draft capital looks like pretty strong. And if he were to get drafted high, he looks pretty interesting. And it's the 20th round, baby. So that's kind of a big part of the fun of these tournaments.
Totally. I will say that we're going to go kind of position by position, starting with the quarterbacks. Then we're actually going to go to the wide receivers, because I think they're just the most fun to talk about. Honestly, we have a little bit more like actionable data and things to sink our teeth into with wide receivers. So we're going to go.
We're going zero running back with this podcast.
We're definitely, this is a zero running back rookie breakdown for sure. Maybe we'll even get to the tight ends before we get to the running backs.
In the deepest running back class in a decade. We're starting with the wide receivers.
Wait 3 hours. We'll get to the running backs, and in one of my favorite running back classes.
The third time we say we're going to wrap it up is about when we'll start with the running back.
That's when we'll hit Amari and Hampton. is about that point. But really quickly, I wanted to get your just takes like holistically about the class. I put out an article as like the overview of this rookie class, and so people can go check out on Spike Week how I kind of like positionally how they compare to like some past classes, and then like where I think what the strengths and weaknesses are of the class. Do you have any, just before we start ripping on a lot of these players, specific takes on the class kind of as a whole.
I mean, I do actually think it's quite a good running back class from a depth perspective. I don't think it's necessarily like this dominant class. I don't think it's like an absolutely loaded running back class if you just think about like how many like high end guys there are, which we can kind of dig into further. I don't have any contrarian hipster takes on Genty. I think he's awesome. That's like, to me, the biggest way you could overthink the class is be like, well, actually, Genty, but no, Genty's great. He should be the Superflex 101. I'm drafting a bunch of them on the big board right now. Wide receiver class, I think, is significantly weaker than last year and previous years. Like that, we've gotten used to really, really strong classes. I don't think it's that type of class. It's not as bad as I was like thinking it was at first, though. I think it's okay. I mean, part of the problem with the wide receiver class is that arguably the best wide receiver in the class plays cornerback, probably.
Right.
But I've started to warm to Tet as like a true high end wide receiver prospect, and I think just draft capital wise, there should be a fair amount of interesting guys. So I'm actually starting to warm up to the wide receiver class a bit. Tight end class doesn't have Bowers, but much deeper than last. I mean, hard to be less deep than last year's class, but the quarterback class
of one, a depth of
one. One guy. Yeah. Quarterback class is bad. That's the probably after last year going from it is a huge difference. I mean, in my stuff, every single quarterback would have been in this class is worse than Bo Nix last year, which sounds worse than it probably is, because I think Bo Nix was a sneaky good prospect.
Me too.
I would have touted that more if I wasn't so obsessed with Drake May, but he rated very well my stuff. But I think it's kind of like Michael Penix, JJ McCarthy level guys who might go, with the first overall pick, but maybe not. Like Shedeur seems like he's not even a lock to go top 3 anymore. So, we'll get into that. But I don't see anything changing that kind of macro view on the quarterback class. It's just nowhere near last year's.
Yeah, I'm excited to record this now because we were just very quickly talking before we went live, and the Senior Bowl is going on, and we're still going to get some more information. Obviously, the combine is going to come, and that's going to shake some things up. So a lot of the wide receiver, running back, tight end stuff can be fluid, right? The guys you really love,
it should be
the guy you really, really love. Tez Johnson comes out and runs a 4.6. It's like that 155-pound weight is bad.
What did he weigh in though? He was 210 at the spike week when he.
Yeah, exactly. There was somebody who was like Versaire in the Spike Week Discord was like, I would like to just see him put on some weight before the combine. And I was like, what is that objectively going to change? If he gains 15 pounds, it's like, so he proved that he could eat a lot before the combine. And then if he still runs really fast, right, and is still lightning quick, and he gains that weight, you're like, okay, that's cool. But if it doesn't like change the player, I'm like, I feel like we're putting the cart out in front of the horse. Like, what's really important here is that is he or is he not a good football player? And obviously, Tez needs to gain some weight. Okay, like no one is denying that, and there's some very real risks in being 155, 160 pounds, of course, but we want to see things over the course of the next, right? I do want to see like how you need to be a certain level of athlete at that size.
Yeah.
Right. Brock Bowers needed to be something, right?
He should, if he even was 165, if he runs sub 4.4 at 165, he might be a second round pick.
Right. Worthy was little and Tank Dell was little. They just weren't as little as Ted.
He's 2.2 little. He's 2.2.
Yeah, he's 2.2. And Tutu was a little bit smaller, I think, even than him.
Although Tutu was a second round pick.
Tutu was a second round real life pick. And frankly, he's obviously not a true difference making like NFL football player. But I don't know. They put him out on the field. Like everybody thought Jordan Whittington was going to come in and take that next job. And then at the end of the season, Tutu was popping up again for a couple of times. I think that was more and McVay. But I think Tutu kind of went small. From he's just too little. But you started talking about the quarterbacks. I just wanted to say that we're like, none of this is final, right? These are all of our early takes. It is I don't even know what today is. January 29th. Okay. So we got a little ways to go. We've both been digging in a lot to these rookies, but we'll continue to massage these takes. And
Yeah.
there'll be guys that I probably say I love today that in 2 months, I'm like, they're fine, but I don't necessarily love
Well,
them
the NFL's
anymore.
doing this too. Like McShay, there's lots of good stuff. People down at the Senior Bowl. I've been listening to the McShay show, and he's down there, and he was like, a coach of a NFL team that needs a quarterback, like stopped him in the hall and was like, what do you know about these quarterbacks? Like what's the deal? Give me the download on this quarterback, because like they have just been coaching the NFL. Like they're playing catch up. So part of our process, a big part is going to be like trying to predict where these guys go in the draft, and that's going to change like a lot. Like the coaching staffs are like just now getting their heads around some of these guys, and they're going to continue to, I think that's one of the things with Penix last year, right? Is that like they fell in love with him like kind of late in the process. It sounds
Right.
like maybe they'd already brought in Cousins potentially. Like this is an ongoing process for the NFL as well.
They would not have done that. I'm fully convinced they would not have done. People thought it was they did the Penix thing because they got Kirk into the building and saw that he wasn't right or whatever. I think that's I think it's the opposite. I think they brought Kirk in because it was probably the right thing to do for the franchise, given where they were, and then they fell in love with Penix, and it was like, well, Kirk ain't going to be here forever, so let's and teams fall in love with guys, but like you said, they might fall in love with them from now for the next couple months. And they may not be in love with them just yet. And so I'm not going to hold myself to a different standard. But one thing I know that this won't change. There's basically only one thing I think that won't change over the course of the next few months for me. And it is that I almost have no interest in any of these quarterbacks. I certainly have them ranked. I know you have your early best ball rankings out there. We have our early best ball rankings out there. I'm not gonna not rank Shedeur, Sanders, and Cam Ward and those guys. I think that's foolish. But in terms of my actual draft strategy, am I targeting these guys? Do I believe in any of these guys as high level NFL players, high level NFL quarterback prospects? You were comparing them to last year's class. I would go so far as to say they're all more so in the JJ McCarthy bucket, not even the Michael Penix bucket to me. And
that's fair. That's very fair.
And I wasn't a big McCarthy fan, and I wasn't a very big McCarthy fan. So I just don't see myself really falling in love with any of these quarterbacks. Maybe I'm anchored to it. I really don't love the way Shedeur plays. And frankly, Cam Ward plays very similarly to Shedeur. I think they can throw a good ball. I think they can make some good plays. I think, do they read defenses great? No. Do they handle pressure well? No. They kind of play like a young Madden player. They play quarterback like a young Madden player. It's like when let's back up. And then I got Travis is down there somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Restrepo is down there somewhere. And
Ward scares me, man. Ward really scares me. He does not and I'm not a film guy. I haven't been trained to evaluate this stuff in a robust way. So take this with all the salt, but it's when I just watched Ward play, I'm like, this doesn't feel in rhythm at all. No. It doesn't feel like an NFL. I don't feel like I'm watching an NFL quarterback stylistically. And he makes some sweet throws, and he runs around the goal line. That's part of the game I really do like. He's not like an especially mobile quarterback, but he runs around the goal line. And so he should have a little juice there for fantasy. But yeah, when I look at these guys, the evaluation, Cam Ward being penciled in as the number 1 overall pick is doing a lot of the work for his eval. If he's not the number 1 overall pick, which he might not be. It's possible. Abdul Carter is an absolute force, and is who I would take if I had the number 1 pick.
It's slam dunk. It's not particularly close for me. I would take Abdul Carter number 1 overall.
It's like the biggest thing you'd poke a hole with his game is it's kind of undersized, and we basically need to see if a Micah Parsons type player can succeed in the NFL. It's well, have you seen Micah Parsons? Because it kind of works. Yes. He's basically Micah Parsons again. That's, from everything I hear, it's he's like that. Why wouldn't you just take Micah Parsons again? That sounds like a no-brainer. Edge is an extremely valuable position. And he's very likely to hit, and probably hit in a way that's like pretty impactful.
Small miss, big win. He's a potential
Yeah.
Hall of Famer, and in a worst case scenario, he's like a situational pass rusher. Wow,
Yeah.
what a
Boom.
bad pick. It seems
Great.
easy.
Lock it in. Lock it in. Like you have to hit like a bunch of times to build these franchises up. So like there's about as easy as a hit is a potential hit as you have. Like I would take Carter. I wouldn't. I mean, obviously Hunter's in the conversation, but I think the issue with Hunter is you go, is he a wide receiver? Is he cornerback? Is he elite at either one? Sounds like maybe he'll play cornerback. Cornerbacks don't typically go number one overall. That's not like that's a valuable position, but I would rather have the standout player at edge where they can kind of wreck a game a little bit more easily.
Yeah.
Obviously, shutdown corner has a big impact too, but I would probably take Hunter number 2. So I'm not even.
Yep.
To me, I'd go, yeah, Hunter is and then like, I might consider going defensive line at 3. Like the NFL is telling me that these guys are, worthy of the number 1 overall pick, and so I'm listening because that comes with a lot of job security early in the season. But if the NFL was like, oh, we're taking Mason Graham number 3, and we're not, and then they slowly, they go down, and then like Tet comes off the board. Like, I mean, if the NFL were to tell me these guys are Kenny Pickett, I wouldn't be. There's nothing that I'm seeing where I'm like, how could they think that?
Right.
So a lot of it for me, as far as the big board goes, is keeping my ear to the ground on the draft capital stuff and seeing, is there any falling happening? There does appear to be some falling happening with Shedeur Sanders, where he was maybe in the mix for the number 1 pick, and it seems like teams are kind of Ward over Sanders generally, and then potentially that Sanders could act, because maybe Ward doesn't go doesn't go 1, and maybe he doesn't go top 2, and maybe he's sitting there for the Giants at 3, and I think they're pretty into him. So, but then does Shedeur go 6 to the Raiders? Is it possible he falls? Is it possible Jaxson Dart passes him as the quarterback too? That doesn't seem impossible to me. Like maybe like 5% chance, maybe less, maybe 2% they actually passes Shedeur, but Dart could maybe go top 10, and that would be interesting, because like my preference is that actually it's like Ward to the Giants, Shedeur to the Raiders, and then Dart actually sneaks into the top 10, because I think if Dart were to go top 10, he'd be draftable. He's the most interesting from a fantasy perspective. I think Dart has the most interesting profile. Now, I'm kind of saying that because he was drafted top 10, right? Like if he's not drafted top 10, I have the right to rescind everything.
Yeah,
because I don't mean a second round Dart. I mean a top 10 stamp of approval Dart.
Is he Michael Penix, who's like, oh my God, he just went eighth overall, or is he Will Levis, who they're like, he's sneaky chance to be number 1 overall pick, and then we wait days for him to come off to come off the board. I will toss one more guy into this like interesting conversation, and it's Jalen Milroe. Not because I think he's a good NFL player, but again, we're talking fantasy football related. We are not NFL scouts. We're not creating I would not draft Jalen Milroe if me. I guess maybe this is a conversation for another day. But I am intrigued by the idea of like building this quarterback room of just a bunch of like crazy athletes, and building a Justin Fields, Jalen Milroe, whatever. Have 3 or 4 of those guys, and like
Anthony Richardson,
right? Anthony Richardson subs out of the game. Cool, no big deal. Come on in, Jalen. Right?
The problem is he subbed himself out though, Eric.
He tapped on his helmet, right? And you're like, all right, Milroe, Anthony, you stand here and you watch. Jalen's gonna go in for a few series, and then Milroe maybe throws a pick, and it's like, okay, Fields, your turn, right? Come in, and then we're just gonna keep rotating these losers through. But I think everyone knows this now for 2 years running. I'm a Moneyball-esque like thinker about sports, and I think like when you're stuck in purgatory, that's not how I would build my optimal franchise. But like if I were the Steelers or something, like how the hell are they ever going to get a good quarterback? Like you're not, probably. So let's do something different. And I think Jalen.
Well, they're maybe going to bring Fields in, so maybe they draft Milroe. And then
see, there you go. Maybe
2/3 of the way there.
Maybe I'll get to see Mike Tomlin try this out. I would probably prefer a different coach did it within Mike Tomlin and Arthur Smith. But I could see Jalen Milroe coming in as this guy some team who's so quarterback needy in a year where there's really no good quarterback free agents and no good rookie class. They're like, look, he's imperfect, but he's a hell of an athlete and he has a good arm. Let's see what we got. And then when he gets in the game and he did it at Alabama for 2 years. And if he gets in the game at the NFL level, like, he's going to run, dude, and he's going to throw the ball downfield. Yeah. And I don't think he's going to be good for winning games, but he's probably going to score some fantasy points. I actually have him from a fantasy perspective as my quarterback one in this class, but that's ignoring draft capital, all that. That is just saying if somebody takes him in the first, right, the Steelers take him in the first or something like that, I will adjust that, right, when we get to the summer, when we get to late April and May, he goes in the 4th round or whatever. It's like, okay, he's not draftable, but if right now I'm like, if one of these guys were to hit in a way for fantasy that I think is like really exciting, I think it could be him in the right situation. But again, that's not like my stamp of approval on him as a football player or anything like that. It's just the archetype.
Yeah, no, if he were like the 3rd overall pick or something, and compared to a different universe where Cam Ward's the 3rd overall pick, I would prefer Milroe because he's gonna run a bunch. But I would also prefer Dart. Dart and Milroe were kind of similar. Like they would be kind of even to me. Milroe, the problem with Milroe is he plays in a style that will potentially get him benched. He makes a lot of mistakes. He's not very accurate. So he runs a lot, but it's like kind of Malik Willis-y in a
extremely Malik Willis-y. It's just Alabama Malik Willis.
Alabama Malik Willis. Right. So that's Milroe, and then Milroe, like at the Senior Bowl, does not appear to be impressing, at least through day one. He didn't have a good day one, it sounds like. Came in with sub 9-inch hands, which people are like, well, that maybe explains the accuracy a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so that, and then obviously with the bigger ball, that could be. I don't think Milroe has really much of a chance of going round 1. I think is the issue. I think Dart has at least a chance, and that makes me more. I'm more interested in Dart. Like Dart's kind of more on my radar now as a guy I might start drafting in best ball because I don't, Drake May I was into last year because I thought he was going to be starting pretty quickly and would be very good once he got in. He didn't start as quickly as I was hoping, and he was a little less good than I was hoping when he got in, although I blame the cast. I mean, the guy's, scrambling his ass off, making sick down.
I thought he played pretty well, yeah.
He played pretty well from a real life perspective. He wasn't like the fantasy skeleton key I was hoping. But the lesson there, and I think even I was kind of making an exception for May, is like I don't really like to draft quarterbacks who aren't going to play because we're only drafting 2 to 3 of them. I much prefer guys who aren't going to play if they're going to miss games in the beginning of the season as opposed to the end of the season, and hurting my week 17 chances. But it still hurts you if they don't play. And Milroe and maybe Dart, depending on when he goes, they're probably going to be put on let's be optimistic and say a Jalen Hurts type of timeline or a Lamar Jackson type of timeline where they're probably not playing for 8, 9, 10, maybe even later into the season. And so then maybe they're extra juice for me in week 17 or week 15 or 16, but like I'm not drafting 4 quarterbacks, right? I'm drafting 3. And then if I suffer a quarterback injury, then I've got I'm losing points at the position and for what upside, it's also quarterback. So the guy doesn't separate as much from the other. So even if I do have him, does he even beat the guys I already drafted? And if it's, like, okay, he's going to miss 3 games, 4 games at the beginning of the season, that's one thing, but still not great. But if you go to if we're talking about missing half the season or more, I'm just not really that interested right now in Dart or Milroe because I think that's the most likely outcome. And that's why I am interested in Ward and Shedeur Sanders a little bit in the big board, because I do think as of right now, even with the Shedeur stuff where he's maybe falling a little bit, he's probably falling to where the Raiders don't have to trade up. He's still probably going to get installed as a week 1 starter. There's just too many teams. I mean, you go through and you do the quarterback rankings and you're like, I guess I'm going to end up ranking Kirk Cousins eventually, or Russell Wilson. Is Russell Wilson going to be the Raiders starter in Las Vegas, with Pete Carroll
Justin
there?
Fields way higher than I ever thought I was going to
Oh,
have in the rankings. Because you're
Fields is
just like,
extremely draftable right
yeah,
now.
you're like, how the hell is he not a starter? You're like, I can't
Yeah,
figure out how. Like, it's either Dart, Milroe, or somebody has to play
yeah,
quarterback for these
yes.
teams.
So that's where I'm like, give me. And by the way, this is with I'm hitting this thing assuming Ward and Shedeur are week 1 starters. So like, I'm not saying that they're splitting time with a Russell Wilson or something. Like Russell Wilson needs to start, or Kirk Cousins does, or it's just like it gets gross. So as long as they're late enough, like I've taken Shedeur in the 150s and stuff. I think it's fine. Ward, I think it's fine too. And in some ways, like big board shares of these guys will probably be like a little bit of a hedge for me in my overall position, where I won't be taking these guys in Dynasty probably unless they're kind of like 107, 108 type guys or later. But if they require like an early first round pick, which you would expect of the first overall pick potentially at quarterback, someone else is going to have them. So, and who knows? Like I could be wrong. Like these guys could be better than I think, and then if they are, they'll probably hit the ground running because they're going to be drafted high and installed as starters. So, best ball is actually the spot where if I'm wrong, I'll probably benefit like the most. Because I think it'd be weird if they ended up like really good down the line and couldn't produce year 1, given that they're both likely to have immediate opportunity.
Yep, I totally agree. That was probably even longer than I expected to unless you want to mention any of these other slappies in the quarterback class. I don't really think they're worth like mega deep dynasty or something like that. But I'm not really that interested in digging into the fact that Dylan Gabriel threw a good ball today at the
He
Senior Bowl.
threw a good ball. He's spinning it. He's got zip on it. But the conclusion was, man, he's not as talented as Tua, but I think this guy could be a
Yeah,
really good backup.
dollar
And
store Tua sounds like just put a bullet in my brain. Like I'm not interested in dollar store Tua, man.
yeah, he's accurate. But that's it's not a strong class. Like people are like, oh, okay. And what they then mean is maybe this guy's a poor man's Andy Dalton.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, oh God, okay. I don't know. Gabriel
It's
might be fine, but I don't think he's going to move the needle for us in fantasy, and he probably won't start for a couple years, even if he does start.
years. He's
Yeah,
like, I know this is I don't mean exact comps, but like, I think the best case scenario for honestly a lot of these rookies outside of like I said, my assumption as well is that Shedeur and Ward start week 1 for probably Giants Raiders, but something, right? They start for somebody, is like the Hendon Hooker situation. So they're like long term, like you really believe in Hendon Hooker and like he becomes the next Jimmy G, right? I know it didn't work out fantasy wise or really real life wise for Jimmy Garoppolo, but he's the like this team
yeah,
invested in that guy, and he's either something happens to Goff and Hooker ends up being really good, or some other team's like, shit, dude, we got to get the Lions next guy. Everybody buys into this guy. That's like the situation for these guys. And so for our purposes right now, best ball fantasy, like I said, mega deep dynasty, super flex or something, sure, but not in these contests.
yeah. But I would say, though, to be honest, like if Dylan Gabriel in some kind of magical run became the Raiders pick at number 6, I would draft him.
I know.
I think he'd be fine. And Jimmy G's the exact because like we would take it's like he's a starter. He's Jimmy G. He's new Jimmy G.
Mm-hmm.
We would draft that guy in best ball for free. Like you need quarterback points, and that he could probably spike a couple times. It wouldn't be my goal to get him, but
He's
like
not a 0 on the ground,
he's not
right?
a
He's not
zero.
a
Yeah,
0 on the ground. He actually ran a good amount at UCF. It's just right. For anybody the UCF, the pride, Gabe Davis and all those clowns running the crazy. I think Gabe played for Heupel, and now it's what's his name, the former Auburn coach. But it's a little bit of, you saw him run less at Oregon.
yeah.
Same thing with Bo Nix, ran less at Oregon than he ran at
No,
Auburn.
but
He ran less.
he can
But
move. He's not a statue.
if he ran for 6 touchdowns, right? If he's if he's the Raiders full-time starter and he runs for 6 or 7 touchdowns, you wouldn't be surprised. So I agree. There's guys like all this, the Milroes, the Gabriels, the Darts, that if they end up in this perfect situation, I'll readdress for sure in May. But as of right now, there's just a lot of other guys, and there's so many cheap quarterbacks, dude. We don't got to get into that today, but like Liam Cohen, who just gave the worst Duval I've ever heard in my entire life in his introductory press conference.
Coach Speak Index had the 0-17 tweet.
I moved
good.
every Jaguar down 2 rounds after I heard Liam Cohen.
You and everybody else. You can get the whole Jaguars starting in the 110.
But that's what I'm saying. I can have Trevor Lawrence like a round before Cam Ward and like 4 rounds before Jalen Milroe.
Dak is going like around Cam Ward.
Like everybody thinks Darnold's gone. I do too. But like so then JJ McCarthy seems like a pretty good. Seems like a pretty good.
I strongly prefer JJ McCarthy to these quarterbacks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was important context to be like, okay,
you guys
hate these quarterbacks, but you might draft them if they were the starter. It's like even then, there's a lot of other guys, right? Like if Justin Fields has a starting a job, and any of these guys have a starting job, like just give me Justin Fields because I know the fantasy points that Justin Fields can provide.
And I do think they have like a little more job security for the end of the season than a Fields, but like maybe not as much as I used to think. Like we've seen guys get benched pretty quickly these days. And so like the whole like, oh, there's a rookie, they're tied to him. And like, I don't know, like Anthony Richardson just got benched in his second year. Will Levis, they moved on from and got, he was kind of quasi benched. Bryce
like, number 1 overall pick.
Yeah.
The team traded their future for Bryce Young and benched him for Andy fucking Dalton, dude.
What after was it after 2 games?
Like 2 games. 2 or 3. It was something like that.
So early. They're just immediately like new coaching staff, like new system and stuff. And they're like, no, you're not it. Like, God damn. It's not what it used to be.
And now he might be. And now teams might be more incentivized because they're like, look, it's not working. And they bench Bryce and now he turned out to be good. So teams might be more incentivized to bench these guys. It's crazy. The quarterback like thing has totally used to get like 2 years out of these guys.
Used to get at least like 2 years. You could bomb. Like when Josh Rosen got I don't know if he even got benched, but they moved on from him because they had the number 1 pick at Kyler Murray and they traded him. That was like whoa. And I remember at the time it wasn't unanimous that they should take Kyler Murray and not move off Josh Rosen.
ESPN this was back when we used to listen to and watch Sports Center and NFL Live and all that kind of stuff. The debates would be, do you take Kyler and trade Rosen? And it was like 50-50. They were like, do we keep trade down? Right? It's like you just drafted Josh Rosen. How could you give up on him this fast? Now teams are giving like
because he's bad.
He's horrible.
He's really bad.
Teams are, and I think it's a trickle
down.
We now
know that he's bad. We didn't.
Yeah, he's absolutely terrible. So yes, take Kyler Murray, who I'm also starting to worry about exactly how good Kyler Murray is. But
not Josh Rosen,
certainly better than Josh Rosen. But
Kyler, by the way, extremely cheap. You can get him.
That's what,
like 110.
Why would I draft any of these? I don't like any of these rookie class quarterbacks, and
they're not targets.
I can have anybody, dude. Baker Mayfield, I swear to God, Baker Mayfield could be a top 5 quarterback for 5 more years and will go outside the top 100 on Underdog. It doesn't matter.
He's going outside the top 100 now.
I know I'm exaggerating, but you know what I mean. I think when they launched it, right, it's like for the first couple of days or whatever, it's like, I don't know, pick 100 Baker seems better than pick 130 Cam Ward or whatever. Like the quarterbacks are just pretty outside of Allen, Lamar, whatever, Daniels, etc., are so depressed in price that I don't feel the need to take the risk on this.
I agree.
This rookie,
you have to get boxed out, and if you do get boxed out, then I think particularly Shedeur, who goes at 161, is kind of an option sitting there for you. Mm-hmm. Ward he's going at 149, and it's not a huge difference, but by the time I'm like, oh, I need a quarterback, he's usually gone. I would take Ward. If he was there when I needed a quarterback, though. It's
really I just usually have one of these,
slightly
right?
Overvalued.
I'll be Charlie Brown with the football with Trevor Lawrence again over at a similar price to taking these guys. But
me too.
We said we're gonna make this a zero running back class, and we're gonna talk.
It's a super flex. We're still going zero running back.
Flex. There we go. I like it.
Super flex.
Super flex. Zero running back. Maybe tight end premium. We'll do tight ends next. How I describe this class for wide receiver is I tend to always kind of start to fall in love with at least even in bad classes a handful of guys, but bizarre is this wide receiver class to me. And you mentioned it. There's no greater way to make a class bizarre than arguably the best wide receiver prospect in the class not playing wide receiver in the NFL. That seems kind of
weird.
I do want to talk Travis Hunter really quickly. I'm glad we didn't lead with this because everybody would have dropped it, because I have probably, I guess we'll call it a hot take on Travis Hunter. He's very good. Okay, so we'll start with the pros. He's a very good football player, and he's a very good college wide receiver. Is he an elite college wide receiver? I'm not so sure. I think he won the Heisman, and I think probably deservedly so. I still would have given it to Ginty, but good, fine. It's fine enough. Heads or tails, whatever. Pick your side of the coin between those two. But either of them even being in contention for the Heisman this year, we just talked about the quarterbacks, was because there was not a useful fucking quarterback in the country. There wasn't a quarterback that had a shot to win the Heisman, right? There in most years.
Wasn't Gabriel kind of in the mix the most?
Yes, Gabriel was like the quarterback in the mix, and they got
He's
their
not Tua,
asses
but
kicked by Ohio State. Yeah, exactly. Dollar Store Tua was the best quarterback in the country this year. He's also like a million
seems
years
bad.
old. Dylan
bad if
Gabriel.
I'm about to spend the number 1 overall pick on a quarterback.
At least Tua was his normal rightful age, right? Like Dylan Gabriel's a 6-year senior or whatever. Went to 3 schools. Also more difficult to judge some of these guys with all the transferring and all that
Right.
kind of stuff in the extra years. We're past the COVID years, but I think that it's easy to sell the Travis Hunter thing. If he won the Heisman, right? But Devontae Smith won the Heisman, and Travis Hunter's wide receiver season, like those aren't even on the same universe of seasons that they had. And Devontae Smith won it not playing defense. Travis Hunter won it because he's a very good college wide receiver and a very good college corner. I don't think he's a superstar at either. And so that's where it becomes tricky here. What I will caveat is I thought I was going to come in to the big board on Underdog in these pre-draft tournaments being bearish on Travis Hunter, because I thought everything you hear, right, is just like how great this guy is. He's a superstar. He's a generational player, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, I don't know. And then he's going in like the 160s. I think he's up to the one. I haven't checked today.
He's in the 140s or 130s now, but we can thank our good friends at Underdog who released the player ideas before the tournament. One Travis Hunter not in
it.
Not in there. So he started with no ADP. So in the first days of the drafts, you had to like star him and take it, and then you had to feel it out because he'd go in like the 160s sometimes. I was trying to take him like the 170s, like not get too greedy, but he looks like he's got his ADP's up to 141 now. But I still think is okay. I still think that's okay. But
I have him in the 130s. Where do you have him ranked?
We just got him up to 133 in the update I'm going to be posting today. So
sounds very similar to where I have him.
Yeah. 134 actually. Yeah. But
137. Yeah, I have him 137.
But I think we might kind of hold steady there. And if he runs up from there, then people can have him. Because I was trying to think through it, like what type of guy am I still glad that I have him? And to me, I was like, look, Ricky Pearsall, I was down to take Ricky Pearsall in this range after he landed on the 49ers as a first round pick. And I'm like, all right, he's got the talent to do it. He probably won't get the opportunity. But if he does get the opportunity, he could be a big guy at the end of the season. That ends up working out. And you're happy that you took him right around this range, right? But once you get a bit higher than this, then you start, I think, probably impacting your advance rates a little bit. Like you're talking about maybe your wide receiver 5. You could be a little bit. The fact that your wide receiver 5 plays cornerback might be a problem for your advance rate. So that's where I'm. It could hurt. It's possible it hurts. That's where I probably just gonna let other people take him.
That is so. I forget what his name. He's 4 Verts on social media. Charles, whatever his name is, got to interview Shedeur, and he the article got shared, and he put got the chance to interview Shedeur, and he like ... He said, "Confident young man." Is what he like phrases it that way. And that's all I was thinking about when you said that. This like our wide receiver 5 is playing cornerback, and that might hurt our advance rates. And it's like, it's like confident young man that are 3 words that don't sound powerful, and they are doing a lot of work there because that is a very polite way to put Shedeur's confidence in himself. But it's this weird push pull with Hunter. I still think we're at this price, like you mentioned, that I don't want to make it all about price and all that kind of stuff. But with him, I think it's more important than any other wide receiver in this class, because he has a very different risk profile than everybody else does. It's like he literally might play defense. Like this isn't like we don't know, like we're going to talk about guys like, are they first round picks or are they fourth round picks? Are they second round picks or are they sixth round picks? Like there's a lot of variance in the wide receivers, but I know they're playing wide receiver. And I know like there may be some team falls in love with them like they did Ricky Pearsall. Some team falls in love with a guy like they did whoever, right? Like that, those things can apply to all of these guys. I know Travis Hunter's going to go high, but I don't even know that he's going to play the position. And so I don't want to pay a crazy premium. And then I mentioned it, at the top of the wide receiver thing, at the top of the Travis Hunter discussion, because I know he's going to, like, I know he's good, but like, he's not Malik Neighbors. He's not Marvin Harrison. I'm not sure he's Rome Odunze at wide receiver. And so, put him in the Rome.
He's not like Rome, but I think
No.
I would have had him ahead of Rome if he was a wide receiver. He's like he's never even played a snap at cornerback. He's just a wide receiver. Yeah. I think I would have him ahead of Rome. I think.
I just don't know.
It'd be close.
Exactly how good he is. Right. There's varying levels of good prospect. It's just like, how good is this guy? Certainly good, but like he's not like if he were Malik Neighbors, right, who was like my flag plant of all flag plants in terms of the early round wide receivers. He was my highest owned rookie wide receiver. Like I was obsessed. If he were that, I would just be like, man, I don't care. Like I'd just be like, he's a superstar. An NFL team would be so dumb to not play that guy at wide receiver, at least to a certain degree to where I wouldn't care. And then like, who knows, maybe he's playing full-time, or close enough to full-time later in the season that I wouldn't care. He's not that level of good. So then you add the cornerback risk. It's just like, man, like I also have this weird thing. Like I'm not sure that an NFL football player can actually play both sides of the football at the NFL level. Right? This ain't Colorado, dude. Like they didn't run that all. They kind of let him just do his thing on defense, and they just run a pretty basic ass air raid offense that like he's not doing that much crazy shit. It's not that complex at the NFL level. And then, so this is going to be a bad team drafting him, right? If it doesn't go well, what happens? Like if he plays full-time wide receiver and he stinks, do they move him to corner? If he's playing both sides of the ball and he stinks on one side, do they move him to the like? If there's so much weird, like so many different weird outcomes that could come of Travis Hunter, and it's almost like a lose-lose scenario for the team who drafts him, because like
you better
nail it, right? You better absolutely nail it, like how you deploy him. Because if it's just imperfect, not even bad, if it's imperfect, you're going to get so much heat from, well, you need to play him more at corner.
Yes.
Right. It's like
Travis Hunter was made in a lab to anger laundry bros. Like whatever you do as a GM will be wrong. Like why aren't you playing him at corner? He's a shutdown corner. You got him like at wide receiver. That's why we were losing games. Or the opposite, right? He's our best receiver and we don't even play him. Idiots.
Yeah.
Or how are you not using one of the most generational talents we've ever seen as a two-way player You're limiting the upside of the pick. Or
why'd you take him if you're only going to play him on one side of the ball?
Of course he pulled his hamstring. You're playing him two ways. There's no way that a human can play two ways at the NFL.
Wait till he returns punts or something. And then they're like, Jesus Christ, he's playing 132 snaps a game at the NFL.
So there's no way. You have to be super secure to take this guy, because
how many teams
your
at
fan
the
base
top
will be
are
curious
super
with you.
secure? No, none of those teams at the top are super secure. So like, I don't know. I'm not trying to like. He's a good football player, and I'm drafting. Like I said, I'm drafting him right now. So all of this is just kind of spitballing.
Yeah, thank you to everyone that we're able to draft. I like this. Let's keep this. Kumbaya. Yes. Let's all take Travis Hunter. I won't take him every time.
If I'm gonna draft a corner,
So his
If I'm
safety
gonna
doesn't
draft
rise.
a corner in best ball, let me do it now because I'll forget about these teams and he's cheap.
He's
Like,
cheap. It's nice. It's
don't
great.
make me draft him at 85 when I think he's playing wide receiver and then they rug pull me and move him to corner in week 6, right? Like, in my
Yeah.
BBMs, right? $25 a pop or whatever. Let me do it on these little boards at $3 a pop. But anything else on Travis Hunter that he's just such a weird guy. I think we would be remiss if we didn't, at least dissect him. But I think there's my ultimate thing is I gave kind of my hand in the dirt player take about him. He's a good football player, but I think price is more important for him than any player in this rookie class.
Yeah. I think the current price is good, and I'm gonna try and get some more of them. It's like one of those things, he keeps rising, so I'm like, oh, I'm getting some Travis Hunter, and then I don't see him for a while, and then I have to like go see up because he rose another 12 picks. I bet now
Exactly.
I gotta rethink this. Is it still good? And I think it is still good. We talk about ceiling a lot in best ball. There's a floor in talent, and this is by far probably the most talented, healthy wide receiver with good draft capital that will ever get to draft at this price. Like, maybe, unless you take a time machine back to like,
Justin
2007 or something, and
Justin Jefferson is the last
sure.
guy, and that was such that
But
was
even
the
he went above this. Garrett Wilson was an 11th round pick when he was
we
way too
laughed at the
low.
Garrett Wilson price. It's still due to this day. Like, remember the rookie Garrett Wilson price? And he was significantly more expensive than Travis.
Significantly more expensive. But, I just pulled up his game log, and this is actually PPR. So, not even as impactful in an underdog. But he had a 30-point game in week 2, 26-point game in week 12, 24-point game in week 13. Those are his only games all season above 20 points. And then he had like another 3 games at 17-ish points. So, great rookie season. But I could imagine a world in which Travis Hunter is installed, for a particular week as like a full-time wide receiver, close to like, let's say 70% route participation type of receiver for a particular week, because maybe a guy got hurt, or, they're experimenting more against this, particular type of defense, or he's the kind of their wide receiver 4, but they run 4 wide a lot that week, or, whatever it is. Like they just, and when he's out on the field, here's another. He might have an insane targets per route run. Anytime he's out there, he's the first read. The quarterbacks look at him. They're designing stuff for him. So we might be like, yeah, he averages like 40% route participation, but he's also averaging like 5 targets a game. So what's the problem? I could definitely see that. And that's just the floor you get when you take a Heisman winner in the 130. So for as long as he's here, I'm happy to mix him in. I don't expect that he'll stay here that much longer, because with a guy like this, you should expect the market to make you uncomfortable. And they haven't really made us fully uncomfortable yet. So I think if he were to go, Matthew Golden, I think, is an interesting kind of line, and he's going around pick 100. Matthew Golden is not nearly as exciting as Travis Hunter, but he's sort of a similar type of bet where you're like, this guy's going to win with route running. He'll probably be a second-round pick, might be a first-round pick. Scouts really like him. Again, it's not like one for one. I'd rather, if Hunter was a full-time receiver, everyone would prefer him. But that's like, well, I'm kind of getting what I want in Hunter, like, but he's definitely playing receiver. And it's like, I take a little cut on the talent to get like the certainty of it. That's where, so just kind of mental framework wise, I think if Hunter were to approach pick like 105, that's where I'd be like, all right, I have another option here that gets me most of what I want with none of that risk.
I totally agree. Let's talk Matthew Golden, because I think he's a pretty interesting guy. He's not next on the list, right? We'll get to T-Mac. We'll get to all these other guys I got. I'm sure you do too. And I bet you could probably guess the guy that I'm obsessed with. But we'll get to that here in a minute. But I think Matthew Golden is like a really fascinating guy, and kicked off a conversation that we were again having super briefly before we hit the record button, to where it's also really funny that he went he transferred, but he went to Texas, because we had this conversation about multiple Texas players at this time last year. where the film bros love him. And also, I'll be totally honest. I watch Matthew Golden, and he does pop off the screen.
He looks great.
It's one of those where I watched AD Mitchell, and I was just like, these film bros keep telling me this dude is special, and I'm like, he's fine. I'm like, I see some of the stuff that you are seeing, but I am this weird. So full transparency, I don't believe that my process for rookies is like some infallible process. It's not, because it's kind of all over the place. I'm very much, especially with the wide receivers, like a data-backed guy. I really, really hone in, and I try to keep it very simple, right? Are you earning targets at a high level, and are you earning yards at a high level? And I mean earning it from a per route basis, right? And that's why a big portion of why Travis Hunter is not like some legendary prospect for me is because he's fine in both of those. He's not exceptional. There's actually a bunch of wide receivers better than him. There's a tight end. There's multiple tight ends better than him in those metrics in this class. And we'll get to the tight ends. Matthew Golden falls on this weird end of the spectrum. Again, very similar to the AD Mitchells and the Keon Colemans. And the you watch him and you're like, dang, this dude does look pretty special. I mean, watch the college football playoffs. It was like, if he wasn't out there on the field for Texas, like they couldn't move the ball. And then the next thing you know, he comes back out there and catches a 40-yarder, right? Spectacular catch. And they pull out a win over our boy Cam Scattaboo and Arizona State. And it's like, that seems great. It's all well and good to pop off the screen, occasionally on routes. 2.1 yards per route run last year, 1.6 in the 2 years before. He was lauded this. He was like one of the biggest recruits Houston's ever gotten. Like, I guess Ed Oliver and Matthew, right? He was supposed to be a superstar at Houston, and he flamed out at Houston. So, okay, you say it was Houston, right? That's where AD Mitchell didn't have that in his bag. It was like, brother, he went to Georgia and Texas. You can miss me with the context. Okay, I'll write off the Houston. I do like to do that sometimes. I'll write off the Houston thing. He had some bad quarterback play, whatever. And then he goes to Texas. He has a better season. But even then, the better season was like, well, Isaiah Bond kind of failed and got hurt. He never really emerged like to a huge level over some like DeAndre Moore, a freshman wide receiver for them. Like we'll talk about what's the tight ends, the Texas tight end's name? Gunnar Helm. Like there are games where Gunnar Helm was the focal point of the pass. Matthew Golden was like, I want to see you be a truly dominant for like extended, not pop off the screen occasionally. I want to see you be like Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison, right? Be dominant, dude, for extended stretches. And he just never was that. And so I have this weird, like, I don't know. I see it, but I also don't see it, if that makes sense with Matthew Golden.
I'm with you. I mean, his profile has some holes in it for sure. I mean, his production just wasn't really that good from a career perspective, even from this year. Like, just, his final season was not all that impressive. I like to pull it in with the RotoViz box score scout. And I don't think they have the college football playoff in there yet. So his numbers will probably jump a little bit.
I don't have it in mine either. So that also, I have PFF up right now, but like in my, little spreadsheets on the back end stuff, I don't have the college football playoff on there either.
Yeah. So that'll help him. I think they're missing 2 games that'll help him, but he, he like without those in there, he only had an 18% dominator rating this year. 18% of yards, 17% of touchdowns, not yards per team attempt at 1.51, not very impressive. So there's definitely like things where you go, I don't know, man. But he has a real chance to go first round because the people love the tape. And like you said, like when I watch him, and I think part of it is because he like cut his pants so they're like kind of shorts, so you kind of like,
this is the way. You look
he looks a little faster.
You look explosive as hell when they just wear basically like biker. They got biker shorts. Back in my day, here's real boomer. You used to get a penalty if the knee pads, right? You still are supposed to wear knee pads. They just don't care anymore. If you didn't have knee pads in, it was a 15-yard penalty. And then even if you had, you used to cheat too. You try to roll it up so it's above your knee, so you can move better, right? That's why these kids aren't wearing them. If you would roll it up and it wasn't specifically over the top, now this is 2010, right? But if you didn't, it was a penalty. Now these dudes, Matthew Golden's wearing fucking biker shorts, dude.
He's wearing literal biker shorts.
Yeah, he looks like a speed demon because he looks like he's just got off the fucking Tour de France.
Yeah, it works. So that of course, everyone loves this film, but they love it so much he might go first round. He's like very live to go first round. And okay, so then we go. Let's zoom all the way out. Guy who went first round for route running skills and is a 3-year player. Early declare guy who went first. Like early declare went first round. Like
big time recruit.
I'm listening. Big time recruit. Gets open. If he's like not that good, he's still probably like gonna do some stuff. Like it's not like he's got this boom bust. I don't know if it'll translate profile. Like his profile is he runs routes pretty well.
Yeah,
he's not like amazing after the catch, but the idea is like he can probably get open. So if a guy can get open and is going to go first round, then even if they're not that good, like if my team, I don't think I would want to draft him in the first round. And if I'm in Dynasty, maybe I'm not going to like be excited to have to spend the 105 on him or 106 on him if he was a first round receiver. Maybe won't go that high, but let's say first round rookie pick on him would feel like a little like his profile has a lot of holes in it for a first round rookie pick. But as long as he's going around pick 100, pick 90, I think it's fine in the big board. I mean, he's you're betting on draft capital. You're betting on the draft capital eval, and then you also have landing spot outs where like what if he hits the landing spot nuts like Ladd McConkey did last year, and obviously then McConkey's a star, so that helps too. But we're drafting
even
guys.
QJ in a bad landing spot did more than 0. That's not it, right? We don't want anybody to be QJ,
right?
But I mean, QJ had a 13.
Keon Coleman wasn't a stone 0, even though
he's terrible.
But,
right. Yeah, he's absolutely terrible. But he's getting dunked on by Matt Collins, brother. Like I don't think you're.
But that's CLV. We can get some CLV here at the very least.
My bank was having issues with their online login today, but I was trying to put my CLV into exactly, and they're not letting me.
No, it's probably just that branch, dude. That you'll be fine.
Yeah. It's definitely just a local credit union not taking CLV.
CLV.
Not a big surprise, but Golden, just to wrap Golden, I think he's somewhere in between like that AD Mitchell and Ricky Pearsall type thing where like it could go really poorly, like AD Mitchell.
He's more Pearsall. He's the Pearsall equivalent in some ways. I actually don't think he's this year's Pearsall. I think he's kind of this year's Ladd to me. Which is a dangerous thing to say after Ladd's breakout, but
those are fighting words, I think.
I know, and he didn't have the yards per route run. So Ladd was awesome yards per route run. So there was a thing that you could go, but Ladd also wasn't.
Ladd was third best in the class last year in yards per route run.
He was elite. He was hurt.
He was hurt, and he has the whitest name ever, and he is white. And so people were like, "Yeah, this is just Wes Welker." It's like, no, brother, he is not. He's very much not. Wes Welker, but it was mostly the injuries to me for Ladd that helped. People were just like, is it fluky? But when he was on the field, he was elite, and Matthew Golden doesn't quite have that.
That's true. Ladd also crushed the combine, which was with my kind of where I stopped.
What did he run? 4.4?
Yeah,
Ladd.
It might have been even faster. He was. I don't know if he was in the 4.3s. He crushed though. He was. I was like, oh, this guy could bury me, because he's like a boring guy who gets open with elite athleticism.
4.39.
Maybe he's really good. Yeah.
4.39. That's crazy.
Yeah. So the boring label got taken off with that performance.
Golden can run. Though.
Golden will also test.
He can run
well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which is kind of why I think he's sort of the Ladd equivalent, the Ladd bet equivalent, right? Like it's similar holes in the profile, sort of different holes, sort of different strengths, but right there in that early second round mix, probably going to be really athletic and gets open. Like the tape watchers think he's a good route runner. So that's the primary draw is guy can run routes well.
I'm lower on him than the market, like the overall like rookie market, but he's also like, so he's not super big, but he, like you said, he gets open and he's a burner, which I'm still like in terms of when we start to talk about like, are you in on this guy, lukewarm on this guy, right, or fading this guy? He's much more in the lukewarm territory for me because of the archetype that he is one that like I could be right and he could still hit in a right. He's not that.
Yeah, that's
good.
the thing. I'm in because I think he could be Jahan Dotson,
Right.
in the sense of like Jahan Dotson. I thought Jahan Dotson was not a first round pick, faded the crap out of him in Dynasty, but he hit it. He hit as a rookie.
Mm-hmm.
Like and Golden, could land. Golden's probably best case scenario in some ways is that he lands in the early second round and goes to one of these receiver needy teams. Like, what if he's the Patriots' second round pick? They take, they take Graham, or they take, maybe they get Hunter, or maybe they probably get Carter. But they trade down, they take a tackle,
offensive line. Yep.
Yeah, and then in the second round they take Golden. Like, oh man, like he could get a ton of targets. So you go, there's various landing spots where you're kind of excited about Golden's ability to produce right away with not a ton of competition. So even if he's not that good, ultimately, because when you think about a wide receiver ceiling, like, oh, this guy's a really high ceiling. Even really good receivers don't hit their ceiling in year one sometimes. Like I still have a lot of hope for Marvin Harrison. I'm drafting him a lot right now, but because I'm getting him in the third or fourth round, and usually the fourth, he might just take a couple years to hit it. Like CeeDee Lamb wasn't a star until like year 3 or year 4. Like these guys, sometimes some of them hit the ground running, and some of them takes a couple years. And I think with Golden, I'm kind of skeptical of like that he kind of like keeps leveling up. Agreed. But I don't need him to keep leveling up. I need him to hit the ground running and do well for 1 year in the big board.
Yep, I totally agree. Not everybody is Malik Neighbors, right? There are just so few guys that come in at 21 years old and are dominant NFL wide receivers, especially when like Malik Neighbors was a superstar prospect. Matthew Golden is a talented but flawed prospect. Like it's just and like you said, I think he can become a good NFL wide receiver within a certain role, but I don't think Matthew Golden is ever going to be like, holy shit, we're building the boat, we're building the plane out of this guy.
I agree.
Right?
I agree.
That's my kind of take.
And if he were to get really expensive, then I think I would start to shift away. Unless there was such a good landing spot.
He goes in the top 20 and he steams way up, right, past the Ladd range, right? Because Ladd went there as a second round pick. Yeah. Despite the perfect landing, like no target competition, Justin Herbert with a newly competent coaching staff. You get Matthew Golden steaming up past that. I think that's when I would get pretty darn squeamish, but I'm okay having some of this now. The guy who is most people's, I assume yours, wide receiver 1 in the class is our good friend T-Mac, Tetairoa McMillan from Arizona. This is a guy who, it's funny to have as good of a final season as he had and call it disappointing. But I think he set the bar so high in his second to last college season that everybody thought he was just about to, like, we're going to get like 1,800 yards. And, he comes back to Arizona with his quarterback buddy, Noah Fafita, and they had a decent second to last season. And it just went off the rails. That being said, like, he still had a very good final season at Arizona. They were just terrible. Fafita was awful. Absolutely awful, and Arizona was awful. But I totally fell in love with the kid 2 years ago. And again, there is no perfect prospect. He is not in the Neighbors Harrison discussion, but he is more in that Rome Odunze level discussion to me. However anybody had that. Maybe you didn't love Rome as much. Call it BTJ, right? Call it whoever. He's kind of in the second tier of wide receiver prospects. I think he's a better straight wide receiver prospect than Travis Hunter is, in my opinion. I
do too.
He is big and long and probably can add some beef. He's only about 215, 220 pounds at 6'5". And I just don't see a lot of flaws. You could argue like a little bit of separation, but I don't know. I watched a lot of him because I would stay up for the Arizona games and stuff like that. And like, he can kind of do it all. And they asked him to do it all this year because they didn't really have much else. He ran slants, he ran goes, he ran double moves, he ran everything. And it's not completely perfect, but I think he can really do it all. And at his size and his talent and contested catch and the route running is really good. I see a pretty high the talent, like you said, with Travis Hunter brings a really high floor here. Is he an NFL superstar? I don't know. I don't know about that, but is he like a competent NFL wide receiver, even in his floor? I tend to think so.
Yeah, I think McMillan. I actually think he's a little bit riskier than you do. I think, like, if I was gonna make the case for Travis Hunter, it would just be like, this dude's really good. Like he can get open. He's great after the catch. Like he has the ability to also play cornerback, and so maybe we care about
he's a football player.
This guy's a good punt returner. They used him on special teams. Like they used him on defense, and he was like a shutdown corner.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's a football player. So
can we do that really quick? I'm not sold that Travis Hunter is a shutdown corner. T-Mac, while we're talking about him, cooked the ever-living shit out of Travis Hunter in college. Elic Ayomanor, who we'll probably get to, Stanford wide receiver, put 300 plus on Travis Hunter's head. Not this year, but the year before. Some good wide receivers have wrecked Travis Hunter at corner. So some of it was 2 years ago, and he definitely got better in his final season at Colorado. But I have some small concerns about. I think Travis Hunter, like the Legion of Boom days with Seattle, Travis Hunter would be elite. Like cover 3, get back there, use your length. Use that Richard Sherman length. But come up and just Darrelle Revis or Sauce Gardner shut somebody down in man coverage. I don't think that's Travis Hunter, but I think be a playmaker and be long and athletic at corner. He could be a superstar in that role.
Another reason he's a risky pick is that he might not be that good of a corner, So when you're drafting as your wide receiver, you might not get the pick 6 points.
Yeah, exactly. We need pick 6s, brother.
Yeah. But I do have Tet as the wide receiver 1, even if Hunter was a full-time wide receiver. But I do think he's I've been on a little bit of a journey with him where because I kept hearing he's Mike Evans, dude. He's Mike Evans. And I'm like, the thing about Mike Evans is that he was 230 pounds.
Yeah.
And it's just he's like a 4, I think he ran 4.3s at 230. He's unbelievable. That is crazy.
Mike Evans made Johnny Football. Everybody thought Johnny Football was the story of that Texas A&M team.
That's
it was
true.
No, Johnny Football got to run around like a madman, and then when he did his stupid shit, who was down there? But the Hall of Fame, one of the best wide receivers of all time.
Literal Hall of Fame wide receiver. He's not even done. We already know he's gonna make the Hall of Fame. I don't know. I'm wrong. I gave him 2 tenths. He ran a 4.53 at the combine. In my head, it was 4.3s. In my heart, it still is.
Yes.
37-inch vertical. That's pretty good. But he weighed in at 231. So I was correct about the weight. 6'5", 231. 4'5", 340. Didn't do the broad. 37-inch vert. So not quite as fast. But I think Tet is probably 4.5s at 210. He's not a burner.
Yeah.
So you're playing like Mike Evans without the size of Mike Evans is. I was
the length.
You get the length, but you don't have the. Yeah, but so one of the things with Tet that does concern me is that 38% of his career deep targets were contested, which is pretty high rate, and he had a 39% contested catch rate on deep targets, which is not very good. Mm-hmm. It's not terrible, but it's not good. If you're gonna play a Mike Evans style of football, you'd want to have an awesome contested catch rate, be the type of guy who's like a T. Higgins or a Nico Collins. Nico Collins, let me pull up those guys because they're kind of the two dudes where you're actually it's fine that you weren't generating a ton of separation deep because
while you're doing that,
bullying guys.
I just pulled up Mike Evans' college game log. Everybody remembers. You probably remember the game that made Johnny Football and that Texas A&M team was actually I shouldn't say that. They beat Alabama in Evans's first year. But if you remember the shootout the second year of Johnny Football, Bama, and it was a million, there were 10 million points scored in that game. Hold on. Bama wins 49-42. This is AJ McCarron and TJ Yeldon, Kenyon Drake, OJ Howard, but Johnny Football and Mike Evans on the other side. Yeah. Johnny Football threw for 464 yards and five touchdowns. Mike Evans had 7 catches for 279 yards.
Oh my God.
He averaged 40 yards,
Oh my
40
God.
yards a catch on Alabama as a sophomore at Texas A&M.
So the highest contested the highest contested target rate that I have on deep targets in my sheet here is Nico Collins, of anyone, career contested target rate on deep targets of 59%. He had a 75% contested catch rate on those
That's
targets
insane.
though. T. Higgins was 41%, so that's pretty similar to Tet. He had a 56% contested catch rate. Again, Tet was at 38%. Tre Harris from this year's class, 47% of his deep targets contested, but 56% contested catch rate. We'll talk about him.
Yes.
Travis Hunter actually had 39% of his deep targets contested, but he had a 56% contested catch rate. A.D. Mitchell, this is maybe something that tape guys liked. He had a 47% contested catch rate on the deep targets. So there's guys, one more, C.D. Lamb, 38% of his deep targets were contested, 50% contested catch rate. So there's like, are you making the acrobatic catches helps me go, okay, maybe you're not like fully separating. And obviously like C.D. Lamb's an awesome separator. Brian Thomas showed up with this same red flag and is an awesome deep separator. So it's not like, but it's just something that I use it as a screener to be like, is this guy, does he struggle to separate deep? And it sounds like maybe Tet does a little bit from what I've read about him. What I think, and then the thing that I've come back to Tet on is that from also what I understand is that he is a really good separator, or at least like kind of a tactician on intermediate routes. That like Drake London, he's going to be able to be a safety blanket / yak producer on intermediate targets. Good route tree, runs a lot of option routes. Able to position his body, so kind of shielding the ball from the defender, all that type of stuff. And he was a really good intermediate producer. So that, like in the numbers, you're like, oh, this guy actually produced a lot of his career yards on intermediate targets. So it's not like Quentin Johnston or something where like this guy was kind of dependent on shorter stuff and deeper stuff, but the deeper stuff probably won't translate. So that could be a bust,
Yes.
And that's where I think with Tet, I'm like, okay, so I think actually my concern isn't that he's the concern at first was like, well, he's not Mike Evans, he's going to try to play like Mike Evans. And now I'm like, no, he's probably not even going to try to play like Mike Evans. He's probably going to try to play like Drake London or like Michael Pittman, but he has more yak. So like Michael Pittman with yak, which actually sounds pretty fun. So I'm kind of all the way.
If Michael Pittman didn't suck, I think that's what T-Mac is.
Yeah, Michael Pittman, but good, and probably installed as a team's number. Because the other thing with Ted McMillan is his draft capital does not look like. I don't think my concerns were really shared by. These are like my statistical screener concerns. Scouts never had these concerns. Like he's going to go top 10. He might go fourth. He's going to go very. I think if he doesn't go top 10, he's going to go top 15. Like and I do think he goes top 10. So
Me too.
When you have a receiver going top 10 who was a really good intermediate producer and good after the catch, and will be, I think, sufficiently athletic and has, he's rangy as hell. So there's definitely a really good weapon in the red zone as well. So I'm in on Tet. I don't think he's, Neighbors level, but I don't know. I don't think he's like that far off the high end guys from last year as far as like what he can do year one. To be able to get him right now in the 4th and 5th round, I'm pretty into it.
I'm hammering him right now. I think the price is a little bit. I shouldn't say that too much. The big board prices are always a goofy thing. Like we look back and you're always like, there's so many misprices because it's such a weird time. But that's also why I like the rookies because they're easily the most mispriced assets. Like we don't necessarily know who it's going to be, but we often know that there's some kinds of rookies, right? Whether it's they get some sick landing spot or better draft capital than we expected, or just a rookie, whether you thought that they were awesome or you didn't think that they were awesome, is just better than we thought that they were. It just happens every year. So I'm very partial to the rookies. But you mentioned the kind of tactician is the perfect word if I would put for T-Mac. And I think that is where I really fell in love with him is lot of the tacticians are small. And they are the guys that when they pull them up on the screen, they say, he's the first guy in and the last guy out, and he wears a hard hat and brings his lunch pail to work, and it's all right. It's that. Not 6'5", 6'6", 215, runs a 4.5, but he's smooth, which is a kind of a weird thing for a long, lanky type. Generally, they're kind of like goofy. Look, like quite frankly, Mike Evans is very goofy when you watch him run. He kind of has a funky running because he's so fucking big. It's like
huge.
how is a big man running that fast, right? And it's like Mike Evans is kind of
4.3s. I think he ran. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, but that's the thing. You're like it's because he's so big, moving so quickly, and his limbs are kind of a little bit all over the place. T-Mac runs like he's 5'11" and he's 6'6", and I think that, and then the ability. I think his route running is borderline elite, and that's where you see that intermediate, success come into play. That when you get someone that big and that smooth who can run routes and read defenses, how the fuck does a 5'11" corner stay with that guy on a 18-yard route, right? Like, how do you hang with a guy who's that smooth with those strides at that size on a 20-yard dig? Like, you can't. Certainly not a college kid, but NFL players can't either. Like, that's just God gave him something that he didn't give to the rest of us. And does that mean he's a superstar NFL wide receiver? No, not necessarily. But I think he has some traits that you just can't reproduce. And he has paired them with some actual technical ability that a lot of the times we don't see out of guys with that size and that athleticism. A lot of the times they're just like big, dumb athletes, and he's not that. And so I think he's pretty special.
Yeah, I think the big, in some ways, athleticism can be kind of a red flag for our purposes because it never is going to go unnoticed. Like the NFL is going to draft the athletic guys. There's a whole event where they have them test. I don't know if you're familiar, but they're going to bake that into the draft position. And so then when we're like, oh man, this dude's so athletic, and he went first round, it's not like always an and. It's like that's because. That's a reason why he was first round.
We double count a lot. I mean, I do it.
We double count.
It's the royal we. Like when I always feel maybe a little self-conscious when I say we do this. It's specifically because I am included in we. Yeah, and like we do that, right? It's like we're like, oh my God, look how fast he is, and he went in the first round. It's like, no, but he went in the first round because he's fast. If he wasn't that fast, he would have gone in the fourth because he's not that good.
Right. And McMillan, I think, might be, he might have like a totally fine. He might not run like Drake London didn't run, right? So
I don't think he should. I don't think he should run because he's not going to run 4.3 or anything.
Yeah, so don't run. Yeah, but he, I was reading he was on Bruce Feldman's Freaks list, I think. But he said they asked him, or was it Bruce Feldman? I don't know. It was some article, and they were like talking about various college football freaks, and they're like, this dude's a freak because of his coordination.
Yes.
And they're like, what's your vertical? And he's like, it's not very good. He's like, I don't think, he said, it was in high school, it was like 32 inches. And he's like, it's probably 34 inches now.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So like, I mean, I would like to see him have at least like a 35-inch vert. That would be nice. But I don't think he's going to crush the combine in any sense. And then he still might go top 10. But that's, in some ways, I'm like, maybe that's my boomer thing. Is it like I want the unathletic guys who still go top 10 because they're going top 10 for because they're good at football reasons.
I totally agree. That's exactly how I feel. It reminds me of we'll get to the tight ends, but it reminds me of he's not unathletic, but it reminds me of like Brock Bowers. Remember the picture of Brock Bowers next to Gronk, and everybody was like,
"How could I forget
this is the fucking generational."
He literally changed his ADP by 2 rounds. That, and then he didn't test. And guys, I don't know if you know this, but athleticism at the tight end position is very predictive. And if a guy's not an athlete at tight end, now is it also predictive to lead the SEC in yak for 3 straight seasons? Is that good at all positions? I don't know. Well, we're still looking into that. Are people digging in to see if that's predictive?
You know why Kyle Pitts ran? Because he sucks at football, but they were like, dude, you're going to go run like a fucking gazelle. So everybody's going to be like obsessed with
you. He was good as rookie year, Eric. Please don't take that away from us.
I'm so done. I'm so done even thinking about this guy as I bring him up. on yet another podcast. But it's like you said, like Brock Bowers is the most unimpressive, like looking and quite frankly, even like at the NFL level, when you just watch him move, you're just like, yeah, it's not. But when you're not a superstar athlete, these guys are all good athletes. Obviously, T-Mac is a good athlete. Obviously, Brock Bowers is a good athlete. But relative to the mutants that we see,
when you stand someone next to Gronk, all of a sudden they don't look that athletic.
6'7", 275, Rob Gronkowski.
Probably the best tight end ever.
Yes.
I mean,
like
think when you factor in blocking and all that,
you factor in everything.
One of the best tight ends ever. That's not in dispute.
But he like you said, how special you have to be to go that high as a by NFL standards and totally average human is like, that's a special football player. And I don't think T-Mac is average, but he's certainly not special in terms of his he's pretty special.
His NFL level athleticism.
Yeah. I mean, 6'6", 215 is pretty special, like even for NFL wide receivers, but it's not like his overall athleticism isn't. And so, like you said,
I think his RAS is going to be fine. It's not going to
be
runs.
We get lost in the sauce on like, oh, he's big, but he's not that fast or whatever. And it's like, yeah, but to do all that at that size, at like okay athleticism, that is special, right? The guys who run really fast and don't produce, we're like, I love that guy. And it's like, so he's that athletic and he doesn't do shit and we love him, but we don't love the guy who does everything at a little bit less. Shouldn't it be the opposite? Like, I feel like we go the wrong direction on some of those guys.
No, I agree. I mean, I think we don't want to pass on Aiden Hutchinson. Right. Let's not be Trent Baalke. And pass on Aiden Hutchinson because there's another guy who had a slight, like, decimal points better athleticism rating. Let's not pass on Aiden Hutchinson.
Arguably the reason the Lions maybe aren't in the Super Bowl, but certainly didn't beat Washington. Aiden Hutchinson not playing. I'm not saying that's the only reason. Jared Goff certainly has something to do with that, and Jameson Williams. But
and the rest of the injuries.
Who's up next on your, not necessarily in your rankings, but that is most interesting to you amongst this wide receiver class?
Well, let's talk about Tre Harris, who has sort of a similar separation thing, you look at him versus like a Matthew Golden, they were going very similarly at first. And I think Tre Harris in the initial rankings was above Golden, and he's now been flipped by Golden. That's mostly as I was drafting it. I took a little Harris because I wasn't sure if that was going to happen, and I didn't want to be completely out on Harris. But he's kind of a tricky guy for me to figure out because he doesn't really separate, but he had a great contested catch rate. So, like, I think he's going to try to win. Like, who's going to try to be Mike Evans or perhaps Alshon Jeffrey? It's Tre Harris. And but will it work? and there's reasons to think it could actually work. He probably will go second round. He was really good after the catch. And is a big wide receiver who's good after the catch, which obviously, that's like the AJ Brown formula. You get excited when you see stuff like that. But big wide receivers who are good after the catch doesn't always work, as we saw with like a Treylon Burks. And
where did AJ Brown go to school?
Ole Miss, yeah. But Tre Harris, there's like a little. I'm concerned about his ability to earn targets. It's kind of the opposite of Tet, where I'm like, at first I thought Tet was going to try to win in this big body cat before I kind of got a full understanding of who he was. Like, are you going to try to like go, mossing guys, with the size and everything? No, actually, he's probably going to, be more of like a YAC possession receiver, and that's pretty cool because you can earn a lot of targets that way. But Tre Harris, I'm like, I don't know if he earns targets, especially like intermediate area targets, and is he going to be reliant on like jump balls and stuff? And then that puts you in a position where you need a good quarterback and a quarterback who trusts you, and then you need to be good enough to do it at the NFL level because it's kind of a tough skill set to translate. But he could go second round, and he was pretty good at this in college. So I don't know. As you can tell, I'm pretty torn on how to play him. I think he's pretty boom bust.
Well, I think everyone, including myself, who is a well-noted Tre Harris slappy, should feel like he's boom bust. I don't really think there's a better way to put his profile. Very weird transfers to Ole Miss after being fine at Louisiana Tech, but again, kind of similar to the Matthew Golden thing. You can write it off to be like, it was fucking Louisiana Tech, man. Like, they're not exactly getting great quarterback play. He did have some other good. They had several wide receivers transfer out of Louisiana Tech, so maybe a little bit of they're all kind of eating into each other on a bad on a not very good team, so there isn't a lot of juice to squeeze. But then he goes to Ole Miss, and I'm trying to remember who him and somebody else, another wide receiver transferred in, and everybody thought it was going to be Zakari Franklin, who then transferred out to Illinois. They both transferred to Ole Miss, and everybody was like, "Oh my God, Franklin is the next, right? Elijah Moore, the next Jonathan Mingo, the next AJ Brown, the next whoever." And it was Tre Harris. He was the absolute alpha at Ole Miss, and just like hit the ground running, set the world on fire. And I was pretty shocked by it as well. And then I kind of thought it would slow down because I really wasn't like a mega believer 2 years ago when he was first at Ole Miss, and it just really never stopped. Like, he was the focal point of that offense, and so that is both exciting and concerning because we'll get to the running backs with particularly like Quinshon Judkins and his best season being under Lane Kiffin and in the Ole Miss offense. This is also very much a real concern for Jaxson Dart, that, like, for whatever we want to say about Lane Kiffin, and he is a unique fella, he manufactures offense. He's kind of a Shanahan level, maybe even better than Shanahan level at the college level. Like, they score points, dude. They play fast as hell, and he knows how to scheme shit up to get guys the football and get his best players the football. So sometimes you get Elijah Moore, which is very scary, but sometimes you get superstars out of that. And even Elijah Moore did not do what Tre Harris has done there. Like, they built the boat out of Tre Harris, and when he was hurt, they struggled, and Jaxson Dart struggled. And so I also, like, I love him, and I'm flag planting Tre Harris as one of my guys in this class, but it's not because I don't see the risk. Like, I see the Lane Kiffin risk, I see the Ole Miss risk, I see the he doesn't have this robust route tree, right? Because that Lane Kiffin wide receivers don't. It's just not how it works. So there's some projection to this. But I also, one of my biggest like process points is, and this is imperfect, but if you show me at the college level that you're going to produce like a superstar, I'm willing to believe that you're a good football player. How good is we can have varying levels of, disagreement on exactly how good that player is. But I see people nitpick these guys who produce at a superstar level. Like, we'll get to Harold Fannin, right? We'll get to some of these. I'm not in the business myself personally of being like, that dude just produced one of the best wide receiver seasons from an efficiency perspective that we've ever seen in college football. And that's what Tre Harris just did. 5.15 yards per route run. That is in the SEC, brother. He ain't playing at fucking Jackson State in the SEC. By the way, Travis Hunter had like 3 yards per route run at Jackson State with Shedeur as his quarterback. Travis Hunter in the SEC over 5 yards per route run. Malik Neighbors, we're talking about how slam dunk of a prospect he was in the SEC with Jaden Daniels, a future Hall of Famer, the best rookie quarterback we've seen in a long time as his quarterback, was not even at 4 yards per route run. Malik Neighbors was. Tre Harris
being near 4 is awesome. It's not that there was any issues with that number. It's that 5 is stupid and doesn't happen.
It's unbelievable. There was a post on Blue Sky that over the last 2 draft classes of wide receivers, I think it was one of the PFF guys. It's like a chart of yards per route run versus man and yards per route run versus zone. And there's it's all scattered right across. Everybody's all over the place. And then in the upper right hand corner is Tre Harris. He just absolutely dominated both. And somebody replied with, you're going to need to remove Tre Harris from all of these in the future because he's skewing the, it's like everybody's over here and then there's him, being super elite over here. That level of production to me is just something I can't ignore. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Tre Harris is going to be an NFL superstar. And I also see all of the flaws, right? I see the separation. I see the blah, 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 blah.
Fifth year guy is another thing. If you're going to poke holes in that, right, you go,
I see the long
fifth year player.
Yep.
He did break out as a true junior.
Yes.
Or I don't know if he's whatever his official, but in his third season, he broke out at Louisiana Tech.
Redshirt sophomore, right?
Redshirt sophomore.
Yeah, redshirt sophomore, but third year.
Yeah, third year. Yeah.
But this level of production, it just doesn't happen, right? And like I think when outliers happen, we tend to nitpick them because we nitpick their imperfections, as opposed to but then we'll give Matthew Golden every excuse in the book and say, sure, he didn't really produce, but look, he's really fat. He popped off the screen, right? Did you see that route? Whatever.
He wears biker shorts.
Yeah, exactly. You see how fast he looks in his helmet and on his fucking Schwinn. Like but we go so far to nitpick. Like we want to drag down the elite production, and then we want to make excuses for the lackluster production. And I just feel like exactly how good is Tre Harris? I don't know. Can he bust? Absolutely. There are red flags, but you just don't do that without being a good NFL, without being a good football player, right? It's like Travis. You don't win the Heisman playing two ways in college football in the Big 12 without being a good goddamn football player. So even as negative as I was being, I know he's an outstanding football player. That's how I feel about Tre Harris. Like you just don't do that, right? And like Ladd McConkey, Brock Bowers, like we can nitpick their size, we can nitpick their injuries, we can nitpick Tre Harris's injuries. You just don't do what these guys did at the SEC level if you're not good at football. And so it's like kind of full stop for me.
Yeah, I think for me, it's because some of my biggest misses have been on kind of this type of bet where you go, look, he's so productive, and people are saying it won't translate, but like it's got to at least somewhat translate because he's so big. He's great after the catch. His name is Traylon Burks. His name is Laviska Shenault. And it's going to work. And that's why I think he is pretty boom bust because he's going to, I think, attempt to do something that doesn't always translate super well. This is on all targets. So contested, the percent of his total targets that were contested over his career, Tre Harris, 28%. Here are the receivers that I have above that. This is just all the receivers that are above that level. Hakeem Butler, 29%. Tariq Black, Johnny Wilson, 30%. Seth Williams, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside at 32%. Will Shepard, who's in this class, Tamorian Terry at 33%, and Sage Surratt. That's the end of the list. So it's a list with a couple guys on it who are like, hey, this dude's really fun. What if he is able to do it at the NFL level? If he's not able to do it at the NFL level, it could get bad. Not too far below Tre Harris, also at 28% here, is Quentin Johnston. And so there's, now Denzel Mims also fairly high on this list. Keon Coleman fairly high on this list. Michael Wilson, which I guess could maybe not be such a bad thing, but, not great. So that's where that's my thing with Harris, is that he does strike me as kind of boom bust because of the way he's going to attempt to win. But, to your point, he was so efficient and he's not expensive and he is still expected to go pretty high in the draft. Like if you're looking at mock draft database, they have him with projected consensus big board of 46. So we're talking about like probably a second round pick.
If he's not in the second round. I would be stunned.
So second round pick who's coming off one of the most efficient college seasons ever. And is really good after the catch. That's like statistically, he does pop for me there. He's awesome.
He's a tank, dude. He's got enough. He's not a burner, but he's got enough juice, and he bullied SEC. Like no one defensive back in the SEC could tackle him in the open field, and so it is a little AJ Brownie in that way. He's not as good as AJ Brown, I don't think, but it's a little AJ Brownie in that way where it's like just get that dude the ball and let him do it and let him do his fucking thing. That's where, like, I think all of those comps are are just like guys that fall into that bucket, the statistical bucket. Screener. I like your use of the screener. When you run them through the screener, these guys pop up is like, but they didn't just have 5.15 yards per route run, right? No. So those guys had some fairly varying levels of concerning production. And this other thing, it's like, that's like 5-alarm fire, right? That's like, oh shit, dude. Like J.J. Arcega-Whiteside is like, okay, he's a second round pick and we're not sure about the production and he has this thing. It's like this is a second round pick, but he has elite of all elite production, but he does have some red flags, right? So that's why we're not taking him. The red flag is why we're not taking him too high. The red flag is not like avoid this guy because we've seen other guys like this bust.
So that what I just kind of went through helps, I think, explain him stylistically a little bit. What I have a model that looks, pulls in comps, and it's not, none of that stylistic stuff is built in. It's looking at the production, things like age, things like draft capital, right? What year you were. So keep in mind, Tre Harris is an older, productive prospect who will probably go day 2. His number 1 comp is Cooper Kupp in this.
That's actually an awesome comp.
It's pretty fun. I mean, it's a reminder that these guys who have red flags in their profile are sometimes pretty good.
Not stylistically or whatever, and certainly not looks, but like it's a pretty awesome comp to where, like, when you get this level of elite production, right? Elite target earning, elite efficiency, elite blah 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 blah. Sometimes the dude, Cooper Kupp still, like, even when Cooper Kupp was having one of the greatest wide receiver seasons in the NFL of all time, you were like, yeah, but he's got some real flaws. Like, he did.
That's true.
He did. He was like, the dude runs 4.6. Like, he ain't taking the lid off the defense. You ain't throwing him jump balls, right? Contested jump balls.
It's the opposite stuff. Yeah.
It was he gets open, and then when he creates yards, and he knows how to manipulate defenses, right? And one thing I love about T-Mac has this, Travis Hunter has this too. The big, long, rangy, physical type guys, whatever, that have awesome like double moves and like ability to, slant go, right, hitch and go, like all that different stuff. And just like that's how they separate down the field, as opposed to like, I'm not saying that's the only way I want you to separate, but because a big part of Tre Harris's game is like throw him a hitch, throw him a 4-yard hitch, and he's going to turn it into 10. That's huge against the defense. You saw this at Ole Miss all the time. We're like, all right, throw him a hitch. All right, throw him a screen. All right, let's throw him a hitch and go. And it's like, oh shit, 60-yard touchdown. And it's like that is a huge part of football, right? Like, that seems like basic, but when you have a threat of something, and then you can come in and like, how did you create this long touchdown when you run a 4.6? Right. Whatever. It's like, well, because you are a good tactician, but you have this other skill that creates that big play, and you're able to capitalize on it because you're a good route runner. Is like, those are like my kind of dudes. Like, look at like T. Higgins. Like, T. Higgins ain't some like lid lifter, but like he makes big plays down the field because he's
and that's kind of that's what you're hoping. Yeah, it's a stylistic hit is in the T. Higgins range. Yes. But I think what I like about Harris compared to, guys like a Visca or the Burks or, the big will it work production guys, and then they get the draft capital and you're like, all right, here we go. And then, you get some sweet screens, but not too much else from Visca. And nothing from Burks really. I think
we wish we had some screens from.
We wish we had some. Maybe we
had some routes.
It's not too late.
I would love
routes would be awesome.
Couple routes.
Yeah. But I mean, Harris, I think, is showing that he can win. Like, the way he will try and play like T. Higgins. I think, he's gonna, and I think he probably is that. I think he's almost like Alshon Jeffrey or something. I think
he's like some mix of those guys. Yeah. Like, cause he's a bully. He's a bully.
Yeah. He's a bully. Right. He actually, like, the red flag I raised with Tet is like, he's trying to play like a bully and he's not actually a bully.
Cause he's not that strong.
Right. Harris actually is a bully. So if he wants to go play bully ball, he can probably get away with it. Yeah, so I mean, in that sense, I'm kind of like, well, maybe it really just does translate. So yeah, Harris, I probably need to take a little bit more of him. Actually, I'm pretty on board with him around pick 100. And as Golden rises, I think I'll probably end up with a little.
I like him better. I like him better than Golden. And so with him falling, it's definitely, well, we'll see if it's nice for me. One thing I keep wish casting, speaking of T. Higgins, is that I do this with every wide receiver. Every time I take him, I'm like, this is actually like it's stupid, but kind of an interesting thought experiment. How excited would you be if T. Higgins leaves and the Bengals draft this guy? Is like a thing that I go through my head, and like every
You
time
don't
I
want
draft,
that with this, because then he's destined to be Burks, because that's what the Titans did with AJ Brown. You can't have him go BT Higgins directly, because then the universe will he'll just be Burks again.
So then if the Patriots draft him, then okay,
Patriots. He would be awesome with the Patriots. He would be like, I don't want to say he would be Kayshon Boutte, but he'd be pretty good there. You know, he'd be.
There's only one.
There's only one Kayshon Boutte. I mean, but that's seriously who May kind of loves guys like that. You know, he likes to kind of give his guys a chance.
He can do the combination of let's just get him the ball. It's kind of perfect, right? It's like we'll just give you the ball, but then I'm also going to let you do your thing down the field. And
he would be awesome in that role. Two guys stylistically that I think make better sense. Just looking at the comp list here, and they're nearly as strong as the Cooper Kupp one. DJ Chark and Michael Gallup. So like big outside receiver, and Gallup had 1,000 yards as a sophomore.
Gallup was a good football player.
He tore his knee. I forget it was ACL or what, but he had a knee injury.
Pete and I had him when we were close to winning BBM. He tore his ACL in the first half. We were counting his fucking score on the he tore his ACL on a touchdown in the second quarter. We had Dak. We had that game stacked up. I'll never forget it. Cardinals Cowboys. We had Gallup, CD, like Kyler, Connor. We had that whole game stacked up. And Gallup catches the touchdown. We're texting each other like, "Let's fucking go!" And then we're like, "Oh no, oh no, he tore his ACL."
Yeah, that's rough. But yeah, I mean, he was productive before that. He never really came back from that. He never topped 500 yards after that. But he had 507 and 2 touchdowns as a rookie, then 1,107 and 6, then 843 and 5. And just an X receiver, didn't generate a ton of reception, but I think that's kind of what you're thinking with Harris, maybe. And then Chark obviously was a 0 as a rookie, but broke out in a nice way as a sophomore. So that's where, but the funny thing about Harris, I do keep coming back to the boom bust thing, and that like maybe it takes a little longer. The ability to earn targets right away, I'm a little bit concerned about. Is something I kind of keep coming back from a best ball perspective. From a dynasty perspective, I'm always going to be intrigued by the ceiling on these types of guys. Like this dude is, he's huge. He's awesome after the catch. And what if it works, And so he's probably a guy I'll be more aggressive on in dynasty, where I think he's going to be like a second round rookie pick type.
That's crazy.
And I'll just have a bunch.
He's like a top 100 best ball pick, and he goes to sit in the second round of dynasty draft.
I think he will because of the rookie. Maybe not because the quarterback class is so thin.
Yeah,
but there's so many rookie running backs that are going to go high,
and the tight ends are nice.
The tight ends are nice too. Yeah. So in tight end premium superflex, I think he probably is a second round pick.
Yeah. That makes a ton of sense. So we're gonna hit two of my guys here because I let you go and you brought up one of my guys. Another one of my guys a little bit deeper down the board. But Ricky White. I'm a huge fan of Ricky White. He's not quite in my top 5 of wide receivers, but he's definitely getting close. He's another
very productive guy.
That pretty big theme for me, right? Everybody could probably, if you just like sort by a couple of metrics, you could probably figure out my my wide receiver rankings. But again, we talked a little bit about this beforehand. My general Ricky White is a great encapsulation of kind of so is Tre Harris, but Ricky White is a really good encapsulation of a lot of my process, and where I think the market gets it wrong the most. It's not necessarily with any one individual player, but like I mentioned with Matthew Golden, we will make excuses for guys who are not productive. And of course, sometimes they hit if you're not right. Ricky Pearsall was not particularly productive in college, but I think he might end up being all right in the NFL. But when Keon Coleman misses, and when AD Mitchell misses, and when, I'm sure I'm missing a million other guys, right? These guys that we said.
Denzel Mims,
you're not that productive in college, but they look like an NFL wide receiver. They run like an NFL wide receiver, right? They look at the routes, right? They pop off the screen. He gets open. He didn't produce.
Philip Dorsett was not big, but that was that one. That was my first ones. I was like, "What? He's a first round pick. This guy didn't do anything."
Trust me, he's open, right?
Yeah,
Watch. This is where they'll watch the tape.
Alec Pierce was a big. Trust me, he got open.
I know. I did that. Okay. The Alec Pierce, I'm pretty sure Alec Pierce led me to. I watched Alec Pierce versus Alabama like 4 times, and I was just like, he's fucking open every play. I'm like, he's cooking Alabama. And so I was just like, I'm in on Alec Pierce, and I have since learned my lesson. And people might say I've gone too far the other way.
You were probably right, because he was playing with Desmond Ridder, who I saw torch against you, by the way, in a 5-5-5. I needed Brock Bowers to advance, and I had Desmond Ridder, and I'm just like, I'm out there, I'm like, I'm stone dead. Like, they could add 3 more quarters to this game, and I wouldn't have a prayer.
Shouts to Desmond Ridder for putting a few. I was talking about trying to deposit CLV. Desmond Ridder deposited a few grand into my bank account because I beat Kerrane in the semis of a 5-5-5 team on DraftKings. But anyway, Ricky White is a good encapsulation of like, I want to bet on the guys who are really good at football in college, more so than the guys who are not very good at football. Like, there's middle ground on this, but right, like the AD Mitchells is like, we're wish casting. And I'm not saying it's necessarily wrong to wish cast, but we're saying, right, the NFL likes this guy, so he's going to get draft capital. And then we start wish casting, like, well, Quinn Ewers stinks, and he was actually open, but they didn't throw it to him, right? And all this, we start making excuses. And then when those guys miss, we never say like, maybe we shouldn't have done, maybe we need to look at the guys who produced in college. But when the guys who produced in college miss, it's like, well, he was too small, he was too slow, he went to too slow. We should have seen that coming. And it's like, there's some middle ground here, right? Where it's like, you need to produce, in my opinion, to a certain level. I don't know what that level, that will always be trying to gauge that level. To be a good football player, you have to have shown some form of production. And so I lean into these like really highly productive players.
Unless you're Terry McLaurin for some reason.
Right, exactly. Terry McLaurin is just a goddamn superstar who just never was a superstar. Ever.
Didn't do anything.
He's like 28. He's like 28 now, and he's a superstar in the NFL. But, and funny enough, he was a guy who I probably should have learned from, who I loved Terry McLaurin, like loved still. I drafted a ton of him this year. But Ricky White, in my opinion, is just one of those. Like, where's the draft capital going to fall? All that kind of stuff. I don't know. But highly productive. Started at Michigan State. He was on so at that time, I want to say Michigan State had Ricky White, Jaden Reed, Keon Coleman. Was Dotson on that team?
Keon Coleman?
Keon Coleman started at Michigan State. Yeah.
Oh, Keon Coleman. Sorry, I thought my brain registered that as Corey Coleman. I was like, what?
Was Ken Walker on? I can't remember. Anyway, when he was at Michigan State, it's a fucking crime against humanity that Michigan State was not better in football, because they had like all these NFL skill players, and they could barely score any points. But then transfers to UNLV and has been awesome. Like, just set the world on fire. Was really the offense at UNLV. 2 years ago, they had a much better passing quarterback. And this past year, if you recall, their quarterback was the one who left they were undefeated. They were like en route to the college football playoff, and their quarterback left because he wasn't getting his NIL. He wasn't getting his NIL paychecks. And they go to the backup. He's also more of a runner, but even still.
But what happened? I wasn't following this. They just weren't paying him?
Yeah, apparently UNLV, Sluka was his name? Matthew Sluka, I believe, was his name. The UNLV quarterback this year. They're undefeated, and I believe undefeated, but they're like in first in the Mountain West, which would, right? Boise ended up winning the conference. It got them the guaranteed bowl spot in the college football playoff. UNLV was the favorite at that time to get it, and their quarterback was playing pretty well. He's not a good passer, but he's a really good runner, and just left the team in like week 6 or something like that, because they promised him a XYZ for NIL, and they like six figures, somewhere in the 6-figure range, and he had received 10 grand by that point. And so he just said, if you don't pay me, I'm gonna leave. And they didn't pay him, and he left. He left the team mid-season when they're gonna go to the college football playoff.
Well,
and he just said, "Fuck it, I'm out."
They should have paid him.
And yet, my guy Ricky White just kept on trucking.
Were they paying Ricky?
Apparently they were paying Ricky. I think Ricky might have gotten the bag that old Matthew Sluka wanted. But this past year, 2.93 yards per route run. That's the year before, 3.83 yards per route run for Ricky White was like the whole passing game at UNLV. I also like that, like dominator rating, whatever percentage of team passing yards, whatever. He was it.
46% of the UNLV passing offense dominator rating. That's a 44% yardage share, 47% touchdown share in 2023. And then he followed that up with a 47% dominator rating, 46% of yards, 48% of touchdowns. That's absurd.
And UNLV is not a awesome program, but again, this isn't Bowling Green. This isn't Harold. That's why people have Harold Fanning concerns. It's a real program. The Mountain West is not a total joke. I mean, they almost went to the college football playoff. Boise State wasn't that far from winning a game in the college football playoff. These are just the exact kind of players that I'm going to believe in. We'll see about how he tests. We'll see about what the draft capital and everything looks like. But this level of production is just something I don't ignore, especially in this class where there just isn't this kind of production in it, right? Why is Tre Harris really high for me? Like they're just like Travis Hunter's, my wide receiver too in this class. He wasn't that efficient, right, in college. So these other guys that are like being hyper efficient and just dominating at slightly lesser levels, those are guys that I'm in on. So Ricky White is one of my kind of flag plants. It's sleepers, if you will. I have him higher than the rest of the market does.
So Ricky White, talk about some of these stylistic screeners and stuff. He's kind of the exact opposite of the way I've talked about these screeners so far. Is that he pops in some really positive ways. He had 15.1 yak per game, which is not too far behind like a CeeDee Lamb. Jameson Williams was at 15.5. Let's see. Corey Davis is the highest I have here at 20.4. But there's, obviously that's nice. Tet McMillan actually very high up here too, 14.7. But sometimes with yak, you see it being produced behind the line of scrimmage on shallow stuff.
Malik Washington, a guy that I was very in on last year, who I'm not mad about, but was just totally right. He ended up being at the NFL level exactly like what you thought.
Yeah, what the concern was that he might be. Yeah,
exactly.
So for example, 14.6 yak per game by Justin Jefferson at LSU, with 48% of that on 10+ yard targets. Yeah. Ricky White, also 48% of his yak on 10+ yard targets, and slightly better, 15.1 yak per game. So that he's popping as this is a downfield receiver who produces after the catch. We like that. He also had the opposite of the red flag I talked about with Tet, where he had a really good contested catch rate on deep targets, but only 24% of his deep targets were contested, which is pretty low. So he's potentially a guy who separates deep, but if he doesn't separate deep, he can also win at the catch point. So I'm kind of getting the statistical screeners on this dude stylistically. You're this guy looks like a true downfield receiver, which I think is something you really want to check on if you're talking about a receiver who was dominating a college offense at not one of the elite programs,
right,
as a fifth-year guy, because it looks like he took a year off. So he, I believe, is a fifth-year player. So
yeah,
older guy, not elite program, dominating it. Sometimes that's kind of Mickey Mouse stuff that doesn't translate. But his 37% of his career yards were on deep targets, 33% on intermediate targets. And as I mentioned, 48% of his yak on 10+ yard targets. He profiles statistically as a real receiver. So that makes it harder to poke holes in the production. I think the thing that has me I wasn't really drafting him because of the draft capital. He's got a peak on mock draft database of 107. Big board consensus, big board has him 139th. So I'm day 3 wide receiver. But yeah, I just honestly, there's enough guys in this class where I hadn't like fully internalized that he has the production profile with like a real wide receiver skill set. So he's a dude I should definitely be mixing in with like the Torrey Hortons of the world.
Yeah, I like Torrey Horton as well, but I'm not that deep into the big boards and stuff yet. But I've taken Ricky White in the last round of every
I like
every
it.
draft.
I need to take him.
We haven't done either Luther Burden or Emeka Ebguka. Do you have anything particularly fiery about either of those guys? I find them to be both. I mentioned the wide receiver class, the summary being bizarre. I think both of these players also have pretty bizarre profiles for likely first round, day 1, day 2 wide receiver picks.
Ebguka, I feel like more comfortable in sort of like what I'm getting. Like I think I'm getting probably an NFL number 2 who doesn't dominate targets but can earn them. Is not like an amazing separator but can get open. Is like pretty solid after the catch. He's an older prospect. His production doesn't jump off the page, but went to Ohio State, was productive-ish, and pretty good in yards per route run, especially as an underclassman. Actually, 2.65 yards per route run as an underclassman, which is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And was especially good as a sophomore. His sophomore season was when he really jumps off with yards per hour and with yak. So I'm like, guy who can get open and can generate yards after catch. Ultimate ceiling, probably not super high. I think he's probably like a number 2 type. But where you have to take him in the big board, you're not being asked to, like need wide receiver 1 ceiling. So I'm pretty comfortable with Ebguka. The guy that scares me more is Burden, who in some of my stuff, I'm like, oh, this is a clear target. He's a 3-year guy. He was a big time recruit. He was pretty productive. But he was kind of gadgety. So in some of the ways that, I talk about with Ricky White looking like, oh, he's producing downfield. He's actually like a legit receiver. There's no red flags with Ricky White's usage. Burden, there are some red flags in terms of how he was used. In fact, the red flags are like screaming bright red. 22% of his career yards were behind the line of scrimmage. 56% of his career yak was behind the line of scrimmage, with just 19% on 10-plus yard targets. Again, like 48% of Ricky White's, 48% of Justin Jefferson's career yak, 10-plus yard targets. Ball travels 10-plus yards through the air. 19% for Burden and 56% on behind the line of scrimmage, designed gadgety stuff. He had a 42% contested target rate on deep targets. So the same separation red flag of like, does this guy even get open deep all that well? Contested catch rate on deep targets of just 38%. So you've got kind of that Tet McMillan, like this guy might be trying to like win 50-50 balls or be kind of need to win 50-50 balls. And he didn't win those that well, actually. And then you go, all right, but surely this guy who's very athletic, he's kind of built like a traditional receiver, big time recruit, he's going to get open. I know that I can count on him to get open. That's not really how he wasn't like, he's a gadget receiver at Missouri. Now, from what I understand, Missouri was like a terribly designed offense. There's another receiver there who's getting kind of more of the traditional stuff. And like, maybe this doesn't reflect like who he is. And just like the high level numbers are like productive, early declare, first round target. So
best recruit in the country out of high school.
Yeah. So like, I don't know what Burden is a guy where I'm like, I want the NFL to tell me kind of where they stand. Like, what do you think of like the tape? Like, is there more there? Like, why was he being used like this? I'm open-minded to him being an awesome receiver at the next level. I'm also skeptical I'm open-minded to him sucking. I guess that's kind of what it is. It's like, I really don't know. And I'm trying to just like sit here in the middle until I get more information and mix him in. I'm mixing him in drafts right now, but he's not a big time target.
I would love nothing more. I am a biased St. Louisan Okay, there is a fucking Darius Miles jersey on the wall behind me. Okay, Luther Burden went to the same high school as Darius Miles. He's from East St. Louis. It's a stone's throw away from me. I've seen many a football game. I watched Luther Burden play in high school. East St. Louis is one of the best high school football teams in the country. It's very fun. If you're ever from around here, you should go watch them play. Or you're ever around here, go watch them play. I thought he was going to be a star. I thought he was going to be 3 years at Mizzou, done, first-round pick, slam dunk, and that might happen, but not in the way that I thought it was going to happen. Like I said, I would love to paint this rosy picture. I'm pretty concerned about Luther Burden. I think he is one of those guys who I think if you put together a 7-on-7 team, you want that dude on. Like they definitely used him in ways to be like, I know he's our best player and we need to get him the ball, but he is not maybe that type of difference maker at the NFL level in all the ways that you need to win in the NFL. I think it's possible that he could grow into that. We've seen a little bit of that with Xavier Worthy. Now he's not Xavier Worthy. He's not that fast. But we've seen that a little bit with Xavier Worthy at his kind of growth over the course of the Chiefs season. It was just like, this dude's really athletic and really fast.
That's a good comp. That's kind of a good comp.
He's not going to run fucking 4.2. Okay. I'm not saying he's that,
right.
But in terms of his best skill set is like, he's just a dude on the football field, right? Like, right. Like, why did he dominate at Eastside? We call it Eastside. So I apologize if I slip up. Why did he, at East St. Louis, why did he dominate there? Why was he one of the best recruits in the entire country? Why was he popping early at Mizzou? It was like, he's just one of the dude, right? Everybody's played sports. You get out there and you're like, that dude is not playing the same sport as we are, right? He's more athletic, he's more talented or whatever. But being more athletic and just overall more talented is not the same thing as being, right? We call a tactician, right? Luther Burden is not a tactician. He's a football, just an athlete that's playing football. And that can work at the college level. And it did work for the first couple of years of his career. But we slowly start to see, like, I would love to blame Brady Cook, his quarterback, for the last 2 years at Mizzou, because Brady Cook sucks. But it's hard to blame when Luther Burden was a lot better 2 years ago than he was this season, when he still had the same quarterback and the same other wide receivers that were with him, right? They built, I'll stop using this phrase, they built the plane out of Cody Schrader, brother, as a junior, and not Luther Burden. Those things are concerning to me.
Don't like that.
I don't think he can win in the ways we want a big time NFL wide receiver to win. Could he be a useful NFL like slot and gadget type player? I think so, because I think he's a pretty special athlete. Like, you put the ball in his hands and he's gonna make some shit happen on a football field. That's like a fancy McCole Hardman, and I don't love that. You know what I mean?
No.
McCole Hardman will make some shit happen with the football in his hands too, and he's done it with the Chiefs. He's scored touchdowns in the Super Bowl. But do I want to pay a premium for that? Now, again, Luther Burden, that's hyperbole. Luther Burden is much better than McCole Hardman.
Yeah.
But is he like a real NFL wide receiver? I don't know, man. I'm really not sold. He never showed me anything in his years at Mizzou to make me believe he's like a real NFL. He's a real football player. He's going to be on an NFL team for a long period of time. But like, Kadarius Toney was on an NFL team for a long period of time, right? Being this special athlete who's like, you can't tackle him in a phone booth. Like, that's cool, but you got to be able to like run routes and read defenses and all that kind of stuff. And like, he hasn't done that at Mizzou, and part of it was he wasn't asked to, but like, was he not asked to because he can't do it, or because Mizzou's incompetent? It's like, I can't always just give these guys excuses. Like, if I'm not giving Matthew Golden excuses, I can't give Luther Burden excuses. And so I really struggle with him. I want to love him because I'm, like I said, he's a hometown boy, but I have a lot of issues with the Burden profile and what he did at Mizzou.
Yeah, I mean, so couple comps that are close and also stylistically concerning. Jalen Reagor.
That sounds about right. Yeah,
pretty high on the list, and then Quentin Johnson, just above Reagor on the list. So, but there's guys. I mean, like Brian Thomas is pretty high up here, which,
But he
is
just
kind of
doesn't play
different type of
anything
guy.
like Brian
He
Thomas.
just doesn't play anything like him. Yeah, but it's again like kind of that's the high level, productive third year guy.
Yeah.
Maybe a little raw, but going to have the draft capital. Going to probably be drafted a very similar spot of the draft.
In the 20s or something like that.
In the 20s, yeah. So stylistically, doesn't really make a ton of sense, but yeah, there's the Rager stuff that's the downside you think about where or Quentin Johnson was like, yeah, your like ability to like play wide receiver isn't really impressing us, and getting the ball. You think of like, oh, you get the ball in his hands and he make plays like that. That's like ceiling, but like ceiling is being able to earn the ball, get the ball thrown to you repeatedly. Like when you're actually in the NFL season, it's like, dude, this guy just got 15 targets. Like, oh my god! Like
Rashee Rice is a great example to me of a like flawed college player.
Yeah,
but just was good, and you can always go the opposite direction, like you said. So you can always go from he was an outside like downfield wide receiver at SMU. Like people don't realize this probably because you watch him play at Kansas City. You're like, Jesus Christ, he's a fucking.
Chris Godwin was an outside deep threat at Penn State.
Yep, those guys we can always move you inside and make you into like a slot merchant because you're good with the ball in your hands, but we can't ever turn you from that to the outside. And that's certainly a lesson that I've learned,
which is a Rager thing. That's kind of the Rager experience.
It was a Malik Washington like thing. Like you need to land like Malik Washington needed to land like with, I don't know, I'm making shit up, right? With the Chiefs or with Cincinnati or something like that. Just like you need like one of 3 landing spots where you end up starting day one and you continue that slot merchant role on and yak merchant role on bullshit targets into the NFL. It's not that it's not possible. It's that you're drawing so thin to like ceiling outcomes. And I feel like we're drawing pretty thin to ceiling outcomes for Burden.
Yeah. I know this sometimes works, sometimes the best recruit, goes and doesn't have like a great college career and then, becomes like a good NFL player. But the guy that I've been like hearing about for like a long time, because he was such a good recruit and like never really put it together in college and then gets to the pros, like, isn't that like reminds me of like Dorial Green Beckham or something? Like
it's 100. Why is it always Mizzou? Why is it always fucking Mizzou? They
get the worst. He's awesome Mizzou. You're right.
Yes, every time they get the best recruit in the country, he fucking isn't that good. Goddamn Mizzou. I'm not a Mizzou fan, by the way, but it's so close to me that we like. I watch all the games and stuff like that. But yeah, DGB was this like superstar, right? Everybody was like, how the hell did Mizzou get DGB? He should have went to Oklahoma, back then. And it was like, well, he's actually, hey, DGB was nuts. So it was, Burden is not like that, but they just, Zamir White had that, right? Best recruit in the country.
Yeah, that's another good one.
Now, granted, he had some injuries, but
some serious knee injuries. Yeah,
I like to use it because it's a great content note. Like it's interesting, but I don't think it's actionable. It's like what you show us. Lad McConkey was nothing. He was a walk on. He was a nobody, and he's a superstar college football player at Georgia, right? Like Cam Scatterbu was a 0-star recruit at Sacramento. He had to go to Sacramento State to like have any form of scholarship to play college football, and he was damn near carrying a team to the college football semifinals.
Probably gonna go 3rd round.
So I just don't really think it matters at all. It's fun, it's cool, but it's like I think it shows.
Well, it seems like it's still mattering
it's mattering to the NFL teams. I think
that's kind of what actually concerns me. I'm like, oh, this dude, like read write-ups and stuff. You're like, this guy, best recruit in the nation.
Why else is Luther Burden going in the 1st round? Because they've been assuming he was going to go in the 1st round for 4 years.
I think that is part of it, and that has me wondering. And I haven't seen any of this so far, but I've been kind of like, is this guy? Does the process sustain this draft capital projection? Because it seems like a lot of, like, oh, well, we just know, as we all know, Luther Burden's sick. And yeah, he didn't have the best years, but I mean, it's Luther Burden.
Don't watch the games and don't look at the data, but we've known since he was 17, he was awesome. So he's awesome.
I'm curious, like, what happens when people who like don't know that he's awesome think about this guy. Like, is that happen? Like, and And maybe, maybe when people who weren't that familiar with his game see his game, they're like, oh, this guy's super athletic. We can do lots of stuff with him. And this team's using him completely wrong. And he's looking great at the combine running the wide receiver, drills or whatever.
He's going to run 4.4 and he's going to be really athletic. So like,
yeah. So in that sense, he's a poor bet to be like a faller in the process. And I think he does go first round, but he's like locked in above Ebguka. I wonder if that holds. That would be kind of,
I mean,
if he slips behind
Ebguka plays
Ebguka,
wide receiver like a professional wide receiver, and Luther
exactly.
Burden does not.
Which is why I don't have a ton of concerns about him, even though his profile has some holes, and he's cheaper too. So it's like I don't have to.
I actually really like Ebguka. Sorry, my Google, for anybody watching this on YouTube, not on audio, my Chrome literally just shut down while we were going. I always panic, and I remember that StreamYard doesn't shut down in those moments, but you always panic like, fuck, did I just waste? You're like,
you're just gonna come back and just sitting in silence.
I was gonna come back and like, dude, I'm so sorry. But obviously it's still going. But I missed some of the Ebguka talk. We don't have to rehash it, but he just feels like you guys joked about your exposure blankets. He feels kind of like that, just like cozy rookie blanket of like, I know there's a shout out Shuby.
Well, I thought Jalen Polk was this, and so it can go horribly wrong. I thought
I think Ebguka's a better prospect than Jalen.
Me too.
I think Jalen Polk was.
I think he's significantly better actually, and he'll probably go first round.
Yeah, I wonder what would happen with Ebguka. So this is it's easy to make this a positive or a negative, but I wonder what would Ebguka always played with a dude who was better than him. But the dude who was better than him, it was like a generational, not to overuse that term, was like a superstar, right? He played with Marvin Harrison Jr. And so it was like, well, how much can Ebguka really do? Right? He played with Kyle McCord at quarterback with Marvin Harrison and Trevion Henderson in the backfield. It was like, who do you think they're going to give the ball to? No offense. Yeah. Like you're an NFL player, but we got that dude. We got the best wide receiver in college football and one of the best running backs in college football and a shitty quarterback. So you're probably not going to get the ball that much. Then Marv leaves. It's like, oh, Ebguka's probably like, thank God. It's my time. I'm going to come back to school because Marv left. Right? Now I'm going to get to pop off. I'm going to be a first round pick. It's going to be great. In walks Jeremiah Smith, 18-year-old fucking Jerry Rice. Like he was a first round. If they did not have the rules about when he would declare right now, and he would be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. He's the best wide receiver in this class if he declared. Like he is
he a true freshman this year?
True freshman, yeah. At 18 years old, he was completely dominating.
29% dominated rating this season, and I don't think the bowl game's in when he had a good game.
Yes.
Oh no, I think it is in. It is. Yeah. Look at that. They added it. Did they add it during the podcast?
What he did to Oregon, what I almost felt bad. He had like 100 and something yards and
7 for 187 and 2 against Oregon.
100 of them were in the first half. They were up. It was 1 million to 7 or whatever in the first half. But like for Ebguka, it's like on one hand, I struggle with those guys, kind of like Olave. Like Garrett Wilson was better than Olave, right? Those kinds of situations. But like when you can still produce with that dude on the other side, and like, we'll get to Trevion. Like I love Trevion Henderson, and I mean they had Judkins also. When you can produce on a team that like never really has to throw in the second half, like when you can still be really efficient out there on that offense with top 5 picks next to you at all times. I think that's a good sign. We take it as like he wasn't that good. I think it's kind of a good sign. It doesn't mean he's a superstar, but I know our guy Shuby, I think he's in your Discord as well. He has taken offense to the fact that people have called him a low ceiling type player, but I do kind of believe that like I don't expect Emeka Ebguka could ever become an NFL superstar. But I think
we often get that wrong though. Justin Jefferson got hit with the same label. He was low ceiling. And sometimes like this time last year, Ladd was probably low ceiling to people who were wrong, including me.
Yeah, but you drafted a ton of Ladd. So like
once I had an awakening. I was I was Saul on
And
the road to
awakening, is
Damascus.
that what Davis would say?
I had an
You got
awakening.
woke.
Yeah,
You got woke to
yeah.
lad. Yeah.
Lad's combine performance knocked me off my horse, and I changed my
Well,
name.
did anyone expect someone named Lad McConkey to be that athletic?
No, I certainly didn't. I mean, let's be honest. But
I am interested to see what Ebguka does at the combine, because like I really don't know what to expect from him athleticism wise.
yeah, it'll be interesting. But like, guys who, and we just talked about this with Rashid Rice, like, another like low ceiling guy, obviously. Like, but like all of a sudden, like, okay, wait, well, you have draft capital and you get open and you have good quarterback play. Then like I do think that there's a desire in, the collective consciousness to say, oh, he's only gonna be able to earn like 5 targets, not 9. I'm like, we don't know that. We
Yeah,
just don't. If Booker can get open and he's in a good scheme that rewards that, and helps that, then he's got ceiling. So, especially year one ceiling. Can you hit the ground running? Is I'm trying to focus more and more on that for the big board. Can you actually hit the ground running? If you kind of fizzle, what does that look like? What are the kind of the fizzle situations look like? Like how bad can it get? And I think it's unlikely to me that he's just like a zero. That he's like he just can't play.
I think Matthew Golden could be a 0. I don't think Emeka Ebguka could be.
That's interesting because I was thinking of Golden as somewhat safer from the perspective of the way he wins, but you're right in terms of the production profile would point to a guy who
in terms of like the NFL team is never gonna he's good enough that the NFL team is just like not gonna sit him down in favor of DeMarcus Robinson, right?
Yeah. I could see that he's just like he didn't produce in college, so he might not be that good.
If Matthew Golden isn't winning the way he's winning at Texas down the field, right? The whole popping off the screen type stuff. If he's not doing that for an NFL
get on
team,
the screen in the first place.
What is he really doing? Whereas Ebguka does all that shit, and he does the things that the NFL teams are going to like, and he's never going to fail in such a spectacular fashion. He may not pop off the screen, but he'll be out there. Is kind of my
yeah.
I'm not saying that like we could look back right in October and Ebguka is inactive on game days, and I'm totally wrong, but that's my general feeling about the two from a comparison perspective.
No, I like that. I stylistically, I think I was probably putting a little too weight on the way Golden wins, but you're right. I mean, maybe he's just not that.
It's
good.
more fun.
He was never that good.
I like college, the way Golden wins a lot. But in terms of like you talked about Tre Harris as really boom bust, I could see the bust side. Golden is not necessarily as boom bust as Tre Harris, but comparing Ebguka to Matthew Golden
makes you think about his downside a lot more. Yeah. Ebguka's not that expensive for a guy who might go first round. And when I say might, I think probably goes first round.
I would be pretty shocked if he doesn't.
Yeah. So I'm definitely a fan of taking him. You can get him in like the 70s and stuff. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm definitely gonna take Bird in here, and then he'll go the pick before, and then I'll be like, oh, let's take Ebguka.
I have Ebguka right in front of Bird, and I might move him up a little bit after this conversation.
I'm still gonna keep Bird ahead because I don't want a full fade.
Yeah, that's the problem.
His ADP is so much higher.
I have strong takes on the wide receiver, but I don't really want to full fade like any of them. So I really struggle with that from a rankings perspective. Like I just like basically took my fucking like he massacred my boy Luther Burden. Like I just took him, out to the woodshed. But I also don't want to have none of him either. But
we're still 5 picks ahead of ADP because rookies win you the titles in these things.
Exactly. So. I think I need to adjust. All right, so some other wide receivers to get through. I think we've hit. Maybe I reached on Ricky White.
Roundabout way. We kind
of Ricky White is one of my guys, right? But we've kind of hit the first round, second round wide receivers generally speaking. Do you have any? I'm just going to list a few of these guys and see if any of them, kind of tickle your fancy. I don't want to get into necessarily, the Ty Feltons or whatever of the world, but
I'm not really drafting. That type of player, I'm not really drafting a ton of yet. Although some of these guys are making noise at the Senior Bowl.
Right.
So I'm trying to figure out if I need to
So
start.
that's a great segue. Not necessarily making noise, but Jaden Higgins is a guy that a lot of people like, and I like well enough. Pat Bryant from Illinois, Tez Johnson, the old Tutu Atwell size fella from Oregon, Torrey Horton that you mentioned before, Xavier Restrepo, Jalen Noel. Any of those guys particularly pop off the screen to you in any form or fashion?
Well, Tez Johnson jumps off the screen for sure, and as it was actually productive.
You can't see him. You can't see him when he jumps off, but he definitely jumps off the screen.
There's something on my screen. That's Tez Johnson. He's really fast. He gets up to speed super quick. I love when you watch him, he a lot of his stuff, he'll kind of find a little spot in the zone, or he kind of stops and the quarterback zips the ball in, and then he immediately restarts. So it's the profile of kind of possession, intermediate receiver, slot receiver type of guy, but then he just adds after the catch because he's really, really quick twitch. The reason he's quick twitch is that he literally weighs 156 pounds. He's one of the lightest wide receivers in NFL, draft history. But it seems like he still has interest from the NFL. There's, kind of the assumption he'll go day 3 because of the size. But you look at the consensus big board, he's 86th, peak is 64. McShates today said, he could see him easily going 3rd round. I just, from a best ball perspective, I'm not that interested in betting against him because I think he's a good player, and I think he's going to have draft capital, and he should be able to get on the field in some capacity as a rookie, even if it's not in a full-time role. And he's free. He's completely
last
free.
Round. Not even
last round.
Many drafts. Yep.
Many drafts doesn't get drafted. So I'm starting to he's kind of one of the guys, kind of wanted to reality check myself with you a little bit with him, because I got to the point kind of shortly before the pod where I was I'm just going to take him a ton. I'm just going to draft this guy a lot because I think he's good. He's a good football player that's going to have when I look at some of these other guys, do they even get the draft capital? Do they actually go day 2, or are they day 3 guys? And day 3 receivers do hit sometimes. Tank Dell, I believe, was day 3, and he hit Amon-Ra, Puka. We get these. Diggs was round 5. Antonio Brown was round 6. You get these guys who crush from day 3, but sometimes it takes a little longer, and a lot of times they just kind of disappear. Or they're special teams guys, right? So I would really, really strongly prefer that the guys I'm targeting end up going day 2, and I think he goes day 2 because I think he's going to have a really good combine. I think he's really fast. He looks really fast.
Quick. Right.
And quick.
This isn't just Xavier Worthy set the combine record for 40 times. This is this is the jitterbug of all jitterbugs. He is.
But his stride lengthens when he gets going. He actually will open things up, and you're oh, he's got long speed. But he can start the movement immediately.
He's a really good football player. I have zero doubts that he's a really good football player, and sometimes really good football players come in unique packages, and Tez Johnson is 100% that. I have the same concerns that everybody else does, and it's not that he's not good, and it's not that I don't think he can produce at the NFL level. It's what does the NFL think about someone that weighs sub 160 pounds, and generally it is that they, no matter how good you are, they don't care, and I think that's stupid. If I were just putting this all out there, I think that's very fucking stupid. They draft a lot of guys who suck at football, a lot, very highly, and won't draft the guy because he's too little, because they have beliefs on what a football player is supposed to look like. And it's you know what a football player looks like? The guy who catches the ball and gains yards. And that's what Tez Johnson does. And I totally understand. And but unfortunately for us in fantasy football, we're not crafting teams. We're not scouting. We're not doing a Madden fantasy draft. We are impacted by what NFL teams think and what NFL teams do. And NFL teams don't give guys like Tez Johnson a big chance. I do think NFL teams are slowly but surely, not all of them, but generally NFL teams are coming around a little bit to this, right? We saw Tutu Atwell go in the second round. Tutu Atwell's they're not stylistically the same. Tutu was a outside wide receiver who actually won down the field like crazy at Louisville. What Tutu did at Louisville,
he's good at doing that in the pros. Like he gets open
too.
downfield. He just is so small that you can't, like, he needs to be kind of a rotational guy.
Yep.
But you see, anytime there's injuries, they're like, let's try throwing it to this other dude. And then you put Tutu on the field and he'll actually start to earn targets because he gets open downfield. Yeah.
Yep. It's just that he's an outside wide receiver at 5'9", 160. Tez, now I think sometimes people think this is a negative. I don't think it's a negative. Tez is so he has to win it on the inside. He's typically, guys move around. It's football. You don't like line up in the slot 100% of your snaps. But, in the NFL, he will be a slot receiver. That's the way he's going to have to win. But I think he can. I really do believe that he can. He needs, like a lot of guys, but particularly guys of that size, he needs the right situation to land in. But I'll never forget, I think it was before maybe Oregon's first college football playoff game. Saban's on, Nick Saban is on the ESPN pregame show or whatever. And it was very like tongue in cheek and like, kind of, he wasn't like trying to like say anything crazy profound, but he said, they were talking about Tez because they were telling the story of, I don't know if anybody, you should go look up. I won't recite it. Tez Johnson's story is awesome. Bo Nix's family adopted Tez Johnson, for anybody. That's why he ended up at Oregon. He didn't go to Oregon out of high school, but he got adopted in high school by the Nix family. Bo went to Auburn. Then when Bo transferred to Oregon, the Oregon coaches were like, we're looking for some wide receivers. He's like, I got one for you. And they recruited Tez, and then Tez goes to Oregon and blows the fuck up. And it wasn't just because Bo Nix, because he was even better with Dylan Gabriel. So Saban says something along the lines of, because they're from, right, Nix went to Auburn. They're from the South. And he's like, people wonder why I'm retired. It's probably because I should have fired the people that didn't recruit Tez Johnson. He said something like that. And I know it's like very silly and whatever, but it's like that tells you that the best of the best know that dude can play fucking football, man. And like, I just believe in those guys, and I'm willing. Now, if Tez Johnson was priced like Luther Burden, we'd be having a very different conversation. I'd be like, Jesus Christ, dude, he's 150 pounds. What are we doing here? Right. But he's undrafted in these big board drafts. And like, when you're as good as he is and as productive as he is for multiple seasons in the Pac-12 and now Big Ten on the number one ranked team in the entire country, by the way, he was the number one wide receiver for the number one ranked team in the country. It like, that matters to me as a last round pick, right? Like, we're talking about, what are the names that I listed? Pat Bryant from Illinois, and like, Jaden Higgins is fine, right? Like, Torrey Horton is fine. Xavier Restrepo is fine. It's like, none of them did what Tez Johnson did. And I understand all the concerns, but I'm going to set those aside and be like, can this dude be Tank Dell? You're fucking right. He could be Tank Dell. And like, am I just going to keep drafting Pat Bryants of the world and be like, oh man, how surprised I am that Pat Bryant went in the 6th round and fucking got cut in training camp. Like, I'll just draft the dude who's awesome in college.
That is what we're fighting. That's what we're swimming upstream against. It's like, these guys might literally get cut in training camp, practice squad, type guys. And I don't think that's Tez Johnson. I think he's active game day, and I think he probably earns a role. It's just not as big a role as we would like.
He can return punts.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to keep drafting because, I mean, you have the, what are we hunting for? We're hunting for one spike week at the end of the season in the 20th round. One spike week and then a season pays off the bet. And that's kind of why we're in the rookie business there to begin with, because, they're more likely to be spiking at the end of the year than the beginning, especially if you got a guy like Tez, you're probably going to have to earn it. And I would prefer the safety at that point. Then give me a guy who I think will make a roster, will earn a role, will impress his coaches. Like, damn, dude, like, I know he's too small and we said we couldn't play on offense, but what if we tried? Because I'm liking what I'm seeing. Like, that kind of guy. Yeah, I think I'm gonna have a lot unless his price rises, but his price would have to rise a lot. He's
Yeah.
basically going undrafted. You mentioned Restrepo. Restrepo's got better draft capital projection of 68, but that's still third round for the moment. He's probably, I think he might go second round. He I mean, I would say he's probably the Pearsall of this class. If Tez is kind of our Tank Dell from a couple years ago, Restrepo's sort of the Pearsall type, where like he doesn't like completely flash in my numbers from like intermediate production standpoint, but he's solid. Like he looks like he can win in the intermediate level, and then lots and lots of film watchers really like his ability to separate and consistently win. That's kind of what I keep hearing with Restrepo, is like this guy wins really consistently. He's having a pretty good Senior Bowl, it sounds like. Kind of a lower ceiling type of slot guy. It's it's kind of his profile, but he probably does the things you want from that. And another guy who I think hits the ground running. So I like Restrepo. I'm drafting him. But then when you kind of think about like, okay, you're into kind of lower ceiling slot profile, gets open, not going to dominate outside. Like, I don't know. Like if Tez Johnson goes third round, like how much more concerned about the weight should I be than the team that just drafted him? So I think I'm generally in. I mean, I am in. I guess we'll see how much the price kind of keeps rising. Because at some point you would go, he's 156 pounds.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing. That's the thing with a lot of these wide receivers, I think, is if we talked about Tre Harris. I love him. But if the market just says, no, didn't you see? He just dominated the SEC for 2 years. He's a superstar. We're gonna put him in the 4th round. I'd be like, oh, whoa. Like he has some pretty big red flags. It's the same thing with Tez. It's the same thing with all these guys. It's like I don't outside
Even the 9th or 10th round, I'd be out. I think.
Yeah.
It's like he's not gonna. He's probably gonna have 65% route participation in good scenarios.
Right. Yeah. Outside of T-Mac, right? Like, but why can't Tez be Josh Downs, who's a very useful?
Yeah.
Like I know he's bigger, but he's not that. I mean, what's the functional difference between Josh Downs and Tez Johnson?
Also, this is the Senior Bowl. He might put on a little bit of weight. He might be 165, and run really well.
God forbid a 22-year-old could gain 15 pounds over the course of a year or something, in 9 months or something like that.
If he's 10 pounds heavier and
Devontae Smith is like 175 pounds and he's a goddamn superstar.
No, I think he was 160. I think he's in the 160s.
Like it's not the end. It's not ideal, but we treat it like it's over, right? Like it's totally over. Like he's too little. No one could ever win that way. And it's like,
oh, you're right. He was 174. He was 170. He was so small. I deducted additional weight.
Yeah.
Xavier Worthy weighed in at 165. By the way,
I mentioned Pat Bryant. I mentioned Pat Bryant and Jaden Higgins. I think they're both like a little bit similar in like these guys might not be athletic enough or talented enough to play at the NFL level, but they were pretty productive.
Yeah.
And they play, that outside wide receiver that was fairly efficient, varying levels of efficient as the focal point of passing games, at power conference schools. I'm not like super excited, but I think they're like generally worth flyers. And then I'll toss Torrey Horton in there, who you mentioned before from Colorado State.
He's kind of an interesting flyer.
Who's a little bit more interesting than those other guys because he showed some like a little bit higher levels of upside, but some injuries have derailed his at the end of his college career. And then he was at Colorado State also, which is a little bit of a tricky eval.
Bech is apparently having a really good Senior Bowl.
Converted tight end who banished Savion Williams to nothingness at TCU.
Yeah, he's apparently like really. He had a good day yesterday, and apparently he's having another really good day.
I think I'm going to move him up.
I just moved him up, and I don't know how much higher I'm going to get him up. Like I still think I'm pretty strongly for Tez, but he's definitely like I'm going to start taking him over like Torrey Horton, that kind of thing. And when I'm like, I'm going to mix in occasionally, I'm mixing in these guys. He's going to be part of that going forward. One guy I do want to just get your thoughts on is Elic Ayomanor. So I am not really been able to like fully understand the hype on. It seems like he's like locked in. day 2/round 2. I don't really get why. Why? Do you know why?
So he really flashed, right? As I don't know if that was his sophomore season or what. Anyway, his first season at Stanford, he really flashed. In particular, as we mentioned before, he had multiple good games, but his best game was against Mr. Travis Hunter and Colorado. At Colorado, 13 catches, 294 yards, and 3 touchdowns. All over Travis Hunter, just dunking on them. And that was like the holy shit. Like, so before that, his highest receiving game was against Sacramento State that season, 89 yards, 4 for 89 and 1. And then all of a sudden against Colorado, he just goes total scorched earth. And then he was pretty good down the stretch of that season. So I think a lot of people expected that he was going to carry that over into this year for Stanford, and he was fine. But I think I wonder he probably has the test given his expected draft
he had
capital.
a 35% dominator rating this year, so he only had his raw stats like plummeted. It went from 1,013 yards to 831, still 6 touchdowns, but much less production, 62 catches and 63 catches. So like his yards per reception went way down. But 35% of the team's passing offense with 36% of the yards, which is actually the same as he had the year before, same yardage share as the year before. So he's an early declare. Mm-hmm. So you would early declare 2 breakout seasons, should go second round. In kind of my high level view is like, okay, but stylistically and
have you watched
like him? A bit. I've read that like he's like what this dude, how is he gonna win? It's like, oh, he's so big. He's not that
he
big.
Looks so slow and he's not that big. I think this is definitely where, like I mentioned, my process is really a hybrid between the data and the vibes, and the data is okay on him, but watching him, I just
high level data is really good. Like the high level data is really good.
I just don't see a lot that is like it. Now, I should caveat it with saying, because if I'm going to caveat some other players, the Stanford quarterback play was very bad. I also, their head coach is, I believe he was the Sacramento State head coach. Ironically, they run like kind of a funky offense. They run their quarterback a ton. They're a little bit run heavy. He was certainly their best player, but I really thought he was one of the players I was most interested in seeing this season, because I thought, like, man, if that stuff down the stretch last year, literally starting from that Colorado game down the stretch last year, was real, like we could see a big time, first team All-American, right? Like 3.5 yards per route run at Stanford to do the Ricky White 46% of the teams, passing totally. Production, all that kind of stuff. Like I thought we could see. And again, it's not that it was bad, it was just uninspiring. I think is what I would say. And
yards per route run dropped to 1.90 this past year, which is not good.
I was just about to say he went to a pretty abysmal yards per route run. And as much as I would love to blame quarterback play and situation, when you're really good, you don't generally drop to those levels of efficiency. Like you may get I mean, T-Mac McMillan got impacted by his situation from a yard, in my opinion. Like if T-Mac played at Oregon or at Ohio State or something, he wouldn't have had 2.7 something yards per route run. Like he would have been in the 3s. Right. And it's like
2.87.
That's pretty good. Yeah, right. So it's very good. But if he was a mega superstar, right, those guys are in the 3, even like Rome was 3.1 or something like that. Ladd was like 3.4, right?
Ladd was off the charts. Yeah.
The superstars are in that 3+ category. T-Mac didn't quite get there, but
Rome was actually 293. So
okay,
it was
293. For some reason I thought he was above 3. Maybe the playoff game. I don't think he did anything in the playoff game, and I think, like I said, my data was or 2 playoff games. My data anyway. it's a lot of vibes, and so yeah, everything needs to be taken with a grain of salt. But I really expected to see an Ayomanor that came out and like dominated this season, and I was woefully unimpressed. And like I said, the like efficiency numbers that I'm a big fan of paint him in a very bad light for the season. And then you watch him, and I'm just like, he's kind of big and slow, and like, you know, if he were big and slow, like maybe Tre Harris is big and slow and just fucking dominated, I'd be like, all right, whatever, it's fine. Like, I don't really care if you're big and slow if you're just balling out. But he didn't really do anything, and like his big games were like 11 catches for 96 yards. And it's like, cool, they forced you the ball 11 times. Like, I can get that from anybody. You know what I mean? And so I went from expecting him to be like a priority to not really very interested in Ayomanor at all.
Yeah, he kind of looks slow to me as well, and he's like big outside receiver, kind of slow. But hey, he was like really productive. Like that's burned me before, like Brian Edwards is one of his comps for me, statistically, but certainly
that seems fitting.
Yeah, kind of has me a little nervous there. Like the other thing with him, stylistically, is that he does have the same red flag as Tet McMillan with the really high contested target rate on deep targets, 41%, and then he only had a 30% contested catch rate. Very similar actually to Denzel Mims, who was also 41% and then 28% contested catch rate. You're kind of like, if you're going to be kind of big, slow outside guy, I would really love you to like crush in the contested catch rate, as I talked about with Nico and T. So, and this is something where like you see the guy like Terrace Marshall is the guy is kind of one of the poster boys for this red flag. Alec Pierce, another guy, Quentin Johnston, like Keon Coleman. Like, it's not great when you're not showing separation, through a high contested target rate, and then you're not like an awesome contested catch winner. Not the end of the world, but it definitely, like when I'm watching, I'm like, oof, this dude, is separation a problem? And then you look at the numbers, and like separation is a problem.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he is not expensive. And the NFL seems to really like him. Like I'm just kind of surprised, like stylistically, that into him, but they seem to be. And if you like just say he's going to go second round with the production profile he has, I don't see any reason that I wouldn't want to take him at like, in the 120s or whatever in best ball. So I'm having trouble getting excited at all, but still like well above ADP. I mean, I said 120s. That's where we have him ranked. His ADP is 141. So I think he's a target. As unexcited as I am. You telling me we shouldn't? A guy's going to go second round in the draft? Shouldn't? I mean, look, I took 2 years in a row. I've done that. I took Jonathan Mingo. I took Xavier Leggett. But I took Rashee Rice. Rice, and it hurt to take Rashee Rice because I'd taken Sky Moore the year before, and he was a mega bust. And I was actually excited about that one. But I took Rashee Rice. I'm like, dude, this guy's gonna be a second round pick, or was by the time I was taking him, he was a second round pick. But his second round pick, and his game doesn't really do anything for me. But he's gonna play with Patrick Mahomes, and people aren't that excited because we just got burned. I obviously don't know the landing spot. I don't know for sure he's gonna be second rounder, but it seems like he will be. And I mean, drafting draft capital at that price usually, I mean, even when it burns you, it doesn't burn you that bad. Like Leggett was like fine. He was fine.
He was fine. Yeah. It's just,
it wasn't great, but he's fine. And Pearsall is a draft capital. Like draft capital. That usually works out okay unless you're having to pay way too much for it.
Pearsall was a first round pick though.
Sure.
Second round pick.
But a horrible situation.
Yeah.
For the immediate, yeah.
Immediate, yeah. Awesome situation for if he
For a
can
long
get on the
term.
field.
Yeah.
Terrible
Yeah.
for getting on the getting
Right.
on the field. Yeah. Ayomanor is definitely one of those guys that I just like really struggle with because, like I said, I have a weird, like quirky process that combines all these things, watching and data and all that kind of stuff. But I like nothing pops off. Like there isn't a single thing other than, and so when nothing pops up, when I can't even like really see it, other than like I said, like one big game against Colorado, who by the way, like I don't mean to besmirch Travis Hunter. The Colorado overall defense was fucking horrible 2 years ago. They got a lot better. That's why they won 9 games this year and why they won 4 last year or whatever. It's because the defense was a bit like one of the worst in the country 2 years ago. So why did he kill them? It wasn't just because he dunked on Travis Hunter. It's because the whole defense was bad. But when it's like, if you can't do this, right? But if we remove that Colorado game, scroll that game log and only like even not just from a box score perspective, from anything you want to look at his career and what looks appealing to you? Nothing. And so like the only when I can see something, right? So like Pearsall as an example, he didn't have a lot in his data profile to show much, but he did have the most likely draft capital because he seemed to be a guy that the NFL liked. Then so he got the draft capital, but even before that was kind of expected, right? First, like probably second round was what our projection was.
Second, third round. First, he was like a third round guy.
Yeah. And then he got real steamy of like, oh, NFL teams love what they see in this guy. And so he moved up to the first round. So let's just
it would be like if Restrepo went first round.
Yeah,
it would
right.
It'd be the comp. Yeah. Which is again, I think not impossible. It's because we just saw with Pearsall.
But so the NFL loves this guy. But with Pearsall, I could at least see there was flashes of efficiency. There was definitely like he would pop off the screen, right? The Matthew Golden, the Restrepo situation. Like Ayomanor doesn't pop off the screen. He doesn't have efficiency. He's slow. He's like, okay, he's big, cool. Like there's a bunch of dudes who are big.
It's like big is not hard to find.
Yeah, big. I can find big. Frankly, I can find fast. I just can't find productive, efficient, and draft capital. It's like when the only thing I'm cool with factoring in. I think this is where you and I not necessarily diverged, but where we have diverged in the past was like I'm so anti-draft capital to a fault for sure. But like you'll be like, well, yeah, I want to see what the NFL says about this guy. And it's like if I can at least squint and see it and I get the draft capital, I'm like, all right, cool. But like last year, for instance, I'm sorry, AD Mitchell, you're probably not a bad person, but he's the example of like I can't squint, brother. Like I can see Tez Johnson more easily than I can see AD
Brother
Mitchell.
Derogatory.
Yes, exactly. That was a Hulk Hogan brother. Hulk Hogan to Macho Man brother. Was like there's nothing here. I'm like, there's nothing here. Like, so some people tell me he's open, even though the quarterback decides to throw it to someone who's not open, right? Like, I hate that argument, right? People made that. Rashad Bateman got a little better this year, but people have made that argument for Rashad Bateman on the Ravens of like, you don't get it. He's open all the time. Lamar just doesn't throw it to him. I'm like, so the MVP chooses to throw it to unopen wide receivers as opposed to open wide receivers, like every third pass play, because he hates that guy. Like, okay, come on, that's ridiculous, right? Take your tinfoil hat off. And so when I can't even squint and see it, and the only thing is draft capital, those are the guys that I just like. I just can't do it.
It's the percent of the offense numbers. That's what
that's
you're looking
squint,
at.
Probably
that's the squint. It's the guy. It's the guy who
pass offense. Yeah,
he was the pass offense. Like truly was the pass offense as a second year receiver, and then was also, although not truly, but he was also the pass offense.
Yeah,
as a third year guy. Then he declares early, goes second round. That to me, that's like a profile that pays off a lot. Not that it's like foolproof, but that's to me, that's the squint. And so I am willing to squint until he gets like to where you're like, I need this guy to like produce pretty quickly, and be like pretty good. But like if you're I mean, it is tough though, because like Xavier Legette and Mingo, it's like you're going in and you're like, this isn't going to work.
AD Mitchell, Keon.
But I
I don't
felt
know,
that
right?
way about Rice. I really did feel that way about Rice as I was
Hmm.
taking him. Like
I
this
liked
isn't
him
going
a
to
little bit
work.
better, but I think it's fair. I think
Yeah,
Rice Ayomanor is like Rice being the upside case for Ayomanor, I think is very fair.
yeah. Because I mean, so now one thing I
But
talked to Eric Croton.
Mingo is the
Mingo's the downs
the
or
downside.
Legette. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I talked to Eric Froton, who I'm going to bring on the pod in a few weeks, but we were just kind of shooting the shit, and I asked him about Io Manor, and he mentioned that down the stretch, Emmett Mosley, who I think was a freshman, really kind of started to come on
Popped.
and take
Yeah.
work from him.
Yes, he did.
So that's a little bit of a concern. But even with that, he still had a 35% dominated rating with 36% yardage share, 33% of the touchdowns. So yeah, he gave up more of the offense in his second season, but still, I mean, like a true breakout season, 30% dominated rating. Some people use 20%. And this guy was at 35%. So, by any measure, a breakout season, and he had two of them. So that to me, that's the squint, is that he was productive. Within the context of his offense, he was extremely productive.
Emmett
But he wasn't
Mosley.
that efficient.
No, I know. Emmett Mosley, these are just the final 3 games. Against Louisville, 13 for 168 and 3. Emmett Mosley followed up by 6 for 63 and 1, 7 for 101 and 1. So it's certainly not ideal that in those games, Ayomanor went 2 for 68, 5 for 62, and then he did go 10 for 109. But he was the wide receiver 2 for the final month of the season for Stanford, which is
I'm going to lower him a little.
not ideal.
I
I don't think. Maybe Emmett Mosley is awesome. Like you said, it's a freshman. It's not everything, but just it's a. I told you my take on this wide receiver class is bizarre, and Ayomanor is another guy in that where you're just like, I thought he was going to be awesome, and then I thought Luther Burden was going to be awesome. I thought Ebguka was going to be awesome without Marv, and it's like I thought all of these guys would be more than they are. And even T-Mac, right? I thought T-Mac would be better than he is. And I mean, I love him, but like I was like, oh my God, he's about to ascend into like superstardom, right? In a final, comes back with his boy at quarterback, like they're buddies, him and Fafita, which turns out that was a death sentence for dude could have gone to like Ohio State or something like that.
Well, he's gonna go maybe top 5 anyway, so
Yeah.
good for him.
Ultimately, it didn't matter, but I'm like, buddy, you could have like won a national championship and you went back and won like 4 games because you wanted to play with your buddy at your school. But Arizona has Arizona has a big Samoan like influencer or something like that.
I think of Hawaiian heritage.
Hawaiian,
I think.
yeah, and that's what they like. The coach wears the lei on the sideline. They have a big connection with Hawaii and Samoa and all that kind of stuff. So I think that was part of why him and Fafita.
The guy that I kind of can't get the squint on with is Isaiah Bond.
Full agreement.
Okay, I've heard some people be like, "Dude, I don't care. He's a star." I'm like, I kind of maybe we got to get them on the pod because I don't really get it with him. He's kind of the he's sort of the AD Mitchell in a sense, where he's like he transfers to Texas.
AD Mitchell is better than Isaiah Bond.
The way you've talked about AD Mitchell, that is not complimentary.
It's not great. It's not great.
Isaiah, those are fighting words.
Tough scene. Oh, that's funny.
He let's see. His yards per route run 1.78 this past year, which I think might be identical to AD Mitchell's actually.
Hold on, I'm gonna go look.
1.78 for Bond and 1.72 for Mitchell the year before at Texas. So,
okay, so yeah. I was a little bit exaggerating on better.
Not really. Those are basically the same number. He was at 2.02 at Alabama, which would have been good if he was in the pros, but it's not very good for a college season. 1.16 in his first year at Alabama. So he's got a 1.73 career yards per route run, which is really bad.
Really bad.
And then he wasn't productive at all. Let me pull up his stuff. So you're being asked with him, it's kind of the Luther Burden thing where it's like, no, trust me, this guy's awesome. But Burden at least was like productive, but just in a gadgety way. Bond had 20% dominated rating as his peak, and that was at Alabama. They transferred to Texas and declines to 13%, 12% of the yards, 13% of the touchdowns. Like, I know he's going to test really well. That's,
Yeah, he's fast.
But he's really fast. But like we're talking about, oh man, gadget usage for Burden and everything. Burden is a freshman, had 27% dominated rating, 37% in his next year, 38% the year after. Like, if you don't pay attention to the specifics of how the yardage was generated, he's an awesome prospect. If you look at Bond, you're like, there's no production here. And then you're like, and I think you might be a gadget player.
Yeah.
So
it's the worst of everything.
Yeah.
He's the worst of all the things that when we get concerned about, all like everything we've run down with 15 other wide receivers, he has the negatives from all of them.
He has the same gadget red flag as Burden, but not productive. But he's going to be athletic. And I guess, and he's going to early declare. So you got that going for you. And he's probably going to be a second round pick, I think. Although I've been wondering if that holds.
Yeah. I don't think it will. I could be wrong. The NFL disagrees with me a lot. But I other than he's fast and he was a good recruit, which maybe is part of what we talked about earlier. The NFL can be dumb. They're not that dumb. Like this is crazy. Like 0 production at Alabama and Texas. Like what are we doing here? He's
like 5'11", 180.
Yeah, he's not Megatron where it's like, okay, we gotta
or A.D. Mitchell.
Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, A.D. Mitchell was at least big and fast, and like Isaiah Bond has been the remember over the summer where he said we're going to call this episode the I'm taking crazy pills episode. Isaiah Bond has been the I feel like I'm taking crazy pills player from this class.
I get it,
where
man.
Like
I feel like I'm taking crazy pills.
Every mock draft database, big board, like all this stuff. I look and I'm just like, what am I missing? Like there has to be something that I'm missing. Like he has some pictures that some owner doesn't want public or something like that they're going to take him in the second round. Like I don't see anything that justifies high draft capital or us being excited about him as a player other than like he went to Alabama and Texas and was supposed to be good. But like there's a lot of guys who were supposed to be good. And that doesn't mean we doesn't mean we take him in the second round in the NFL draft. And that doesn't mean we should, even if they go in the second round in the NFL, that doesn't mean they're going to be good in the NFL. He's shown 0 to prove to me that he can play football. And so like, why would I be excited about this guy? I have him way down the list on my, I'm being nice and ranking him. Honestly, like, I don't really know why he deserves ranking over so here's a great example. Ja'Cory Brooks transferred to Louisville, but also went to Alabama and really didn't do anything at Alabama. But he went to Louisville and he balled the fuck out. He was awesome. He was their passing offense. He was efficient. He was productive. He was really good at Louisville relative to college football standards. And it's like no one cares about Ja'Cory Brooks. And it's like they had the same path. They did the same thing, except when the one guy transferred, he did nothing at Texas, and the other guy transferred to Louisville, and he was awesome. And it's like I just can't figure out. I just can't figure out the Isaiah Bond thing. I really can't figure it out. And look, if he's awesome, white flag, right? You'll see me. I'll wave it. I don't care, but I'm not drafting that dude. And even if he goes in the third round in the NFL draft, I won't draft him over the summer probably because I need to see a lot more from a player. Like maybe if he's a last round pick and he's on the Bengals or the Chiefs or something, like sure, but like we're talking about crazy outcomes for me to be interested in that guy.
Yeah, I mean, if he goes third round in the draft, I get a lot less interested because I've sort of promised. I feel like I'm being promised that he's going to be a second round pick. And as a second round pick, guys who I think aren't going to be anything or sometimes really good. As a third round pick, you're already in a bucket of receivers that's like a bit less, it's a lot less safe. You all the time have third round guys who just are nothing. And like guys like Cedric Tillman, who like I think can play, but like just like, no, you're nothing for now. And then like, later on you're like, oh, he's actually pretty decent. Like he's maybe not amazing, but like he can be a starting outside wide receiver for them or whatever. So is he going to hit the ground running? Like what happens when I'm wrong? I start to get way less worried if he's a third round pick. But he's still being projected to be a second round pick, which has me a little nervous. At the same time, yeah, I really do have a hard time getting excited about Bond. It's like a bet purely on athletic early declare goes highly in the draft. But what if he doesn't go that highly? What if he's a third? And I think he could pretty easily fall. But he's going to blow up the combine, I think. And so that should help him.
Yeah.
So it's sort of Mecole Hardman-y, I think. Or like, what if Jalen Waddle never did anything in school?
What if this really good player wasn't really good at football?
What if he just wasn't good? Jalen Waddle went bad.
Jalen Waddle went bad sounds quite terrible.
Sounds bad. It sounds like what I just watched this past year, honestly.
Yeah, exactly.
It sounds a lot like 2024.
Jalen Waddle's still going to get hurt every time he touches the ball, but he's not going to gain yards. Yeah, that sounds fun. Bond did get hurt also this year, by the way. So he's also a health risk.
Well, or you could spin that as like he never had a chance to show what he would have shown.
Yeah.
Plus we you got Ewers there who's bad. So maybe that's part of it.
I love the people will use that against Texas wide receivers. Like, well, Ewers wasn't. I'm like, stop it. Like Texas scored so many fucking points. I'm like, yes, I'm not excited about Quinn Ewers.
I'm trying to squint over here, okay?
As an NFL quarterback, but like they have Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning as their quarterbacks. There are a lot of worse quarterback situations in college football. You can miss me with the fact that those guys are an issue. Okay. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Fair.
Like, come on. Also, Texas lost everybody. Literally every starting player on Texas last year was gone. The world was their oyster. If you came into, why did Isaiah Bond transfer to Texas? Why did Matthew Golden transfer to Texas? Because all those other guys were gone. And so if you stepped in and you didn't do shit with this, right, there was a bunch of DeAndre Moore, freshmen, right? These, if you can't outproduce them, you're probably just not that good. I don't really see. There's not. I would love to make excuses for talented football players, but there just aren't any excuses here to be had.
Yeah, and even the like peripheral stuff is really not there. I mean, he had 101 career rushing yards, which is like, okay, something.
Sick.
He returned 2 punts in his entire career.
Yeah, so we can't even make the like, well, maybe he's Devin Hester, right? He just we got nothing. We got nothing.
He's raw. He's fast. He's athletic, raw. NFL likes him. That's the bet. So to me, he's not like undraftable, but we talked a lot about, I'm squinting on
you won't.
Ayomanor.
You're too nice. I'll say he's
undrafted. But as a rookie, I've got a rookie about over a round below his ADP. That should tell you something.
It's hard to do. Right? Yeah.
It's hard to do. Yeah.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Let's hit it. So, Pat, we're on 3 hours and we haven't hit running backs and tight ends. Let's save those and let's do it. We'll keep this quarterbacks and wide receivers.
Do part 2. Truly a zero running back pod.
It literally
zero running back.
Literally. And we'll do the FFPC rookie episode next. Running backs and tight ends, brother. That's what they love. So we'll do.
You want to do it live from the Sizzler?
This is zero running back pod, and the next one will be the Sizzler pod for FFPC bros. I do well since now we just a couple more. I'm actually saying just a couple more minutes. A few more names. You mentioned Jack. Do you mention Jack? I think it's Bech.
It's Bech. Okay, I thought it was Bech.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I don't know, but his teammate Savion Williams. I know. I believe that was the first I saw. The first prospect profile that our good friend Davis Maddock wrote up was Savion Williams, which I thought was an interesting choice. We haven't discussed him, and then we didn't talk about Torrey Horton. I don't know if you have any thoughts on Torrey Horton. And I've gotten questions about Nick Nash from San Jose State, who
apparently Mike Renner was not impressed with him at the Shrine Bowl. Is the
Nick
latest I
Nash.
heard on Nick Nash.
Yeah, he's like 26, and he put up some counting stats at San Jose State this year.
Former quarterback, I think. But yeah, I've been Steph Miller told me that I got to check out Renner, talking about him from the Shrine Bowl, and was not bullish. So from what I gather, I still got to go back and listen, but I'm very curious about that.
I will just do the Nick Nash thing then. It's nice, it's fun. It's like I love a good fun San Jose State wide receiver who's productive in college, but his productivity was not efficient. And so like when you're like way older at a way bad school and you're cool, you got 1,000 yards, but it's like a fake 1,000 yards, you're talking about like 2 yards per route run. Like,
yeah,
he's not really of interest to me. If you're just trying, some of these names are like in the 20th round of the big board. If you're trying to just not be on the same guy every single time, these are some of the names that you could like potentially be interested in. But I am kind of interested in your Savion Williams take. I have like probably some maybe divisive takes. I don't know. He's a very weird prospect. But you mentioned Bech, however we say his name, and Savion kind of fell behind him down the stretch at TCU this year, which I think made things a little bit tricky to determine, what is Savion really at the NFL level.
Yeah, and he's like a hybrid player, but he's tall, so you're probably not going to have him convert
6'4",
running back.
Right?
Yeah. So I'm kind of wary of Savion. I think he's okay as like a dart throw guy, but as I'm actually drafting the big board, I haven't found myself really taking him. There's sometimes players where you're like, this is an appropriate ranking for this guy, but then when he comes around, you're like, that's the highest wide receiver. You're like,
all the time.
Great time to take a tight end.
Happens all the time. Yep. I'm like, I'm like only 2 spots past his ADP. Yeah. That seems fine. And then every time he comes up on the board, you're like, I don't know. Cole Kmet looks good.
Yeah. Here. yeah. Hunter Henry. No, he was pretty productive. Yeah.
I've done the Cole Kmet thing with Caleb multiple times, so that's why I've
But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with Savion. I think we literally, let me pull up where we have him ranked, but I mean it's pretty spot on.
ADP 165. That seems really rich, by the way. Like we were just talking about Tez is the last round pick, Ricky White is the last round pick. Certainly the Nick Nashes of the world are last round picks. Like what's Restrepo? Like Restrepo's 2.5 rounds more expensive. Jaden Higgins, who I know has not been tearing up so far.
No, he's apparently not had a good.
But Higgins is cheaper. But like Savion, like is he even a wide receiver? Like
that's the problem. Is he even a wide receiver?
Yeah.
So that
I know he's going to play offense.
Like,
it's not Travis Hunter because at least I know he's going to play offense. But he basically converted to running back partway through his 5th season of college football. That's not great.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a Wandale thing where you're like, no, he'll be good. He'll play out of the slot and like he's good after the catch and stuff. Like I think he's like kind of more of a true hybrid player. And yeah, I think I'm going to lower him a bit. It's just. It's not that he can't do anything, but like I would like him to be where if he does anything, I'm psyched. I kind of
think he's like a good football player. Like again, like to the we talked about like Burden and stuff like that. So like this is not me saying I'm bullish on Savion. I'm not because I'm not. I'm lower than him. I'm lower than ADP on him. But I think he's one of those guys where it's like the team was like, this is one of our best players. And they had no competent running backs, but it's going to piss me off that I don't know if I'm saying it, pronouncing his name right, but Bech, whatever, was like emerging.
Maybe it's just Jack Bech, and I completely made up the Bech thing. I'm not sure.
We're just gonna call him Jack.
Just call
We're
him
gonna
Jack.
go full Robin Williams. He's Jack. Jack was emerging, right? And they had John Paul Richardson. They had some other wide receivers, and they were like, our running backs are terrible, and Savion's one of our best players, and he's also our best player with the ball in his hands. So they were like, let's just use him back there, right? How do we get him the ball and have this like a little bit more competent offense? Let's just do that. And like part of me likes that, where it's like, it's not ideal for like projecting him as an NFL wide receiver, but also it's like projecting him as like, does the team think he's one of their best football players? Like, right. That's what like middle school teams do. That's what high school teams, they're like, we had, when I was coaching high school football, I coached my alma mater for a while, which by the way, I always claim Sam Laporta, but he went to our rival. My alma mater in high school, Sam Laporta went to our rival. He went to Highland, Illinois. But we had a big time recruit who went to Tennessee when Lane Kiffin was at Tennessee. The kid I coached, he was a wide receiver prospect, freak, like total freak, 6'5", 225, benches like 340, 40-inch vertical, like sick athlete. Didn't have great hands, which was kind of an issue for playing wide receiver. But we didn't have a quarterback. We have this SEC wide receiver in a small school, but we couldn't get him the ball. So we were like, what do we do? Put him at fucking quarterback. Run zone read, right? Like we just built, right? We built the plane out of him. We're like, we can't get him the ball when he's playing wide receiver, so let's just make him play quarterback. I think TCU did a version of that with Savion, which is like bullish on like, he's like a good, like real football player.
Yeah.
But it's not bullish on like, if he was so fucking good, like it's not like their quarterback was bad. If he was so good as a wide receiver, they would just like throw him the ball, you know?
Yeah.
Because like you could be more effective by doing it that way. So
and
I have concerns.
He peaked with a 20% dominated rating this year. He had 17% in 2023, 13% in 2022, 4% in 2021, and 2%. As a freshman, he only played one game.
Fifth year, right?
Year. Yeah, fifth year guy. So he did nothing in 4 games total through his first 2 years. Didn't really do much in 12 games in his third season. Didn't really do much in 11 games in his fourth season. And didn't do that much as a receiver, you know, but of course he runs for 322 yards on 51 attempts this past year. So yeah, I'm not completely out on it, but I would like him to be cheap. Like, you know, you're going like 1 week from this guy is all I need. And, you know, you're not too far below where Devin Neal is currently going.
Love
which,
me
you know,
some Devin Neal.
I'm a Devin Neal fan. So, you know, that's, you know, like, I mean, it's 15 picks. It's not like they're back to back, but it's like still like you're in a range where there's guys. Dylan Sampson is at 164. I think he has some upside at running back. Well, you know, we'll save the running back episode, but there are other rookies, not even necessarily a receiver, but there's other rookies where I think you're like, this could be like a hit, like a hit that's
big hit.
A big hit. There's running, like if like, I like Savion Williams because he's kind of a converted running back. Take a run. What about a running back?
What about an actual running? What about that Devin Neal guy who had 5,000 yards as a running back at Kansas? Like I think that seems like a better running back than Savion's few hundred yards as a running back at age 23 or whatever at TCU.
Yeah, and the draft capital for him isn't like super. I mean, he's at 65 right now, consensus big board, but I think like Xavier Restrepo's at 68. I would take Restrepo pretty comfortably to go first in the draft. I think he's probably like a round 3 guy. And, you know, there's got like good college players who've just like been complete, like these tweener type guys. Like we've seen some of them just who was the dude at Kentucky who was a quarterback / wide receiver that the Raiders drafted? Blanking on his name.
Oh my God.
He was good.
He was like, starts with
he was legitimately good.
He full-time converted to like Wildcat quarterback.
They had all their quarterbacks get hurt, and he converted to quarterback.
Hold on.
And was awesome. And I think they won a bowl game with him at quarterback.
Yeah, they did.
But he was supposed to be a receiver, but then because that happened, he got kind of like pigeonholed as a tweener running back receiver, went to John Gruden, and Gruden immediately blew it, had no idea how to use him. And then he goes, I think he was with Miami. He kind of had a little bit of a second act as like a rotational guy. Never became anything. But I think that's but he was a third round pick. He was a third round pick.
Fudge was this?
Why can't I remember it?
I also can't find. I can't remember his name, and I can't find it. So that was Terry Wilson was the quarterback that year.
Lynn Bowden.
Thank you. How long ago was that? I just keep clicking through the. Yeah, that was 2019.
Yeah.
Jesus, we've been doing this for way too long.
Well, we can't even remember the guys anymore. So
it was 6 years ago. Lynn Bowden.
I feel like if I can't remember Lynn Bowden, that's a warning. Now I haven't slept like basically in 2 nights because I got a baby who doesn't sleep, but still, with no sleep, I should be able to remember Lynn Bowden.
If it makes you feel better, it won't. I'm a diehard St. Louis University basketball fan. Okay, last night they played VCU. That's a huge rival. VCU is also the best team in the conference, but SLU is right up there. The game took a million. It starts at 7 p.m. local time. The game took one of the longest college basketball games that didn't go to overtime I've ever seen in my entire life because, of course, there was a bunch of fouls at the end. SLU won. Nice little upset. But one of the VCU players' family got into a fucking fist fight with SLU fans during the game in the stands.
Wow.
Because that player, he went to SLU as a freshman, and he's from St. Louis, and his family's from St. Louis, and he's a shit talker. Okay, he's a shit talker, and he was getting booed a lot and getting yelled at and heckled by the fans and stuff. And I don't think his family appreciated that very much. And then VCU was down 9 with like a minute left to go, and I think finally they had enough of the heckling, and a fight broke out in the stands. Like a bunch of these, and for anybody that knows like SLU basketball, or like no one will, but this is not blue collar, like tough people. This is like 70-year-old rich white dudes in fucking sweater vests in the stands,
just throwing down,
and they're throwing down with the family of other team's player. So the game, they didn't stop. It took like 15 minutes for them to stop the fight. The security couldn't get in the stands to stop it. Yeah, it's on TV. Look it up. It's crazy. It was absolutely.
I'm gonna check this out.
Yeah, it was hilarious. And so
if you hear a TV in the future, it's me watching this.
It wasn't my headphones going crazy or anything possible on your end. Yeah, it was you watching 75-year-old white men fight VCU fans.
I'm not gonna watch that. I mean,
yeah, it was dude. It's on like New York Times and CNN and everything. It made then it wasn't that crazy, but it was funny. But nonetheless, I didn't get home till late, and then you're all jazzed up, right? Get home. So that's why I told you before we started recording this. I'm like, I got to go get some caffeine. I went to the gym, and like I'm gonna fall asleep when I know this is gonna take forever. So I really need some caffeine. But any last just last wide receivers that we haven't hit on? I kind of like just super quickly. I kind of like Elijah Badger from Florida. He was pretty interesting. He was productive at Arizona State. Transferred to Florida. They had a pretty gross passing attack, but he was pretty efficient there. And then Kobe Hudson, also Alabama transfer. Speaking of Isaiah Bond, Alabama transfers to UCF in a just disgusting passing game. But I'm not going to fall for the UCF receiver 2 years in a row. Javon Baker this past year was pretty good at UCF, and so was Kobe Hudson. But, kind of some guys that were solid in bad situations for multiple different years. I kind of tend to like those guys. But again, like last round flyers that I think are just like in the player pool.
Yeah, I'll mention that there seem to be a few guys that are having pretty strong Senior Bowls. So Jalen Noel would be one of those guys. He's the other Iowa State guy. Jaden Higgins apparently, at least yesterday, did not have a super impressive day. kind of like a bigger guy. So maybe, the separation
He's
wasn't.
big and slow. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing, McShane mentioned that the cornerback that he was going against a bunch was probably like the player of the day. So maybe he just had a tough matchup in that regard. But Jalen Noel's the other dude from that school, and kind of interesting is like a bit of a deep threat type guy. 34% of his career yards on deep targets. Torrey Horton is another dude who's kind of interesting as a deep producer. 41% of his career yards were on deep targets. But like the one thing with him is that his when he's like not winning deep, a lot of it was like manufactured behind the line of scrimmage. 37% of his career yak came behind the line of scrimmage, but he was pretty good. Like the numbers point to him being a pretty good separator deep. Only 21% of his deep targets were contested, and 41% of his career yards were on deep targets. So he lived deep, and he was getting open, and he had a 58% contested catch rate on deep targets. So Torrey Horton is like kind of a deep threat guy, and he's going undrafted. So as a last round, like Darius Slayton. Like, let me find like rookie season Darius Slayton.
That's a good comp actually.
So that that would be, and then Jalen Royals is another guy who apparently is having a really strong Senior Bowl. So he's and he kind of has a similar profile to Horton actually.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, I've been kind of like, why wouldn't I just take Horton? But then, one of them's not being talked about as like one of the stars of the Senior Bowl, and one is, and Jalen Royals is the one who is. So he's a guy I want to kind of keep mixing in. He's a little bit more expensive. You got of these rookie guys who aren't like locked in. He's kind of the most expensive of them, I would say.
The price was a little surprising. 160 ADP on Jalen Royals kind of caught me off guard.
I know it's kind of weirdly high, and he does have a gadget player red flag with 43% of his career yak coming behind the line of scrimmage targets, and 16% of his total targets, was just fairly high. But 39% of his yards were on deep targets, 61% contested catch rate on deep targets. So you expect that he's going to win deep, and then like you get the ball in his hands shallow, kind of like, again, maybe a little bit like you don't really get the ball in like a Slayton's hands underneath and let him run, but like kind of that wide receiver 3 on an NFL team, but can kind of pop for a spike week. Unfortunately, he's a lot more expensive than the other guys, but I think the Senior Bowl stuff is important because the NFL teams think it's really important,
right?
And it's not just that they are observing these guys in person, which of course they are, but they have the Zebra Technologies player tracking stuff in the helmets. You can actually check this out. Just Google Zebra Senior Bowl. You'll see the site. They've got it going back years. And some of the guys, like, like, it's funny because like a bunch of no-name dudes will be like first, but then you'll be like, oh, Jaden Reed like kind of crushed in everything. Or I think Ladd McConkey did really well in some of the stuff last year. So it's like tough for me to get a sense of, like, oh, this guy, they're this guy. But I think the NFL teams are they're able to take some of what they're looking at and then compare the data to it. It's a pretty important part of the process, like way more important than I realized a few years ago, than I would have thought like a few years ago. And he seems to be really standing out there. And that is going to be potentially pretty big for his draft capital, where Royals has 82 on the consensus big board right now. I would bet that he goes ahead of that number.
Love it. Shout out Zebra Technologies. Yeah. Exactly what you come and listen to this podcast for. As I mentioned, I didn't expect that we would only get through wide receivers, but I kind of love it because
we did quarterbacks too. Come on.
We did quarterbacks too for like 20 minutes. I love the wide receivers. Okay. I'm obsessed with the wide receivers. I also find it to be like the most impactful part of the rookie class, not only because of like people will want to know like, oh, which wide receivers do you love? I actually think it's a lot as much about like maybe which wide receivers do you need to like maybe be cautious about, or not even like don't draft them, but here are the red flags, right? Like pointing out the pros and the cons, and maybe the guys who like, oh look, he's going to go second round, so why don't I love him? And then you're like, well, here's the Isaiah Bond case. Like he might go second round, but like just be cautious type of a thing. And so the wide receivers I think are the most fun and the easiest to talk the most in depth about. We will come back with the follow-up episode to discuss the running backs and the tight ends. Honestly, the two deepest parts of this whole class. We spent 3 hours talking about the two shittiest parts of the whole draft class. I'm most excited about the running backs and the tight ends. We will come back with an episode there. And if you're still listening to this 3.5 hours in, we're bringing back Best Ball Bros here on Spike Week, and Pat's going to come join me. We're going to change it around a little bit. We're going to have some fun. You guys get to know maybe some of your favorite fantasy analysts in the whole space. Be on the lookout for that later this week, maybe this weekend. But we'll catch you guys next time for some running backs and some tight ends, a little FFPC rookie preview. See you guys. Peace.